Well, hi all, and welcome to the MegaCast by Actual Tech Media. And I have some exciting news for you here today. If you couldn't tell from the title and banner, it is AWS Day, and we are here together to explore the AWS support, enablement, and extension ecosystem. This is going to be a great day. We're going to cover some smart solutions to help with some of the common challenges in AWS environments, as well as some innovative ways to potentially avoid them. We'll discuss trending ideas and potential innovations that are going to help you power up your existing AWS environment. Now, to help guide us through this exciting conversation on today's MegaCast, we will get to chat with top experts from Veeam, Rubrik, Haiku, Palo Alto, Gigamon, and Sneak. These innovators are here today to talk to us about all the current trends, tools, and technologies that you need to know as you consider some best practices, awesome enhancements, and how to get the most out of your AWS investments. Now, if you have not joined us for a MegaCast in the past, a very special welcome to all you first-timers out there. Actual Tech Media created the MegaCast and the EcoCast series to help educate technology professionals just like yourself on the latest innovations and trends in enterprise technology. Now, these webinars are designed to get you the hottest insight and up-to-date information to help you solve your most pressing technology challenges. But before we get into our exciting sessions, there's a few things that you should know about the MegaCast today. Now, of course, we do have some of those awesome prizes lined up for you, so if your eyes went right to that prize icon, hang tight. I'll come back to those in just a moment. But first, I want to draw your attention over to the questions box in your webinar control panel. So if you haven't already said hi, please do so. We love seeing all you awesome folks connecting from around the world. So give us a virtual wave and a hello to everyone else out there in the community today. Now, the questions console is also a great place to let us know about any technical issues that might come up. Knock on wood, of course. But I do want to remind you all that a browser refresh is probably going to clear out any of the more common tech bugs. But if not, if they're being a little bit particular today or persnickety, go ahead and shoot us a message in that questions tab there, and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help you out. But now, most importantly, the absolute best thing about that question tab is we want this webinar to be an informative experience for you. And that comes from all of you asking any of the questions that you have kind of bubbling up about AWS. So make sure that you get those questions into that questions console. Now, not only are we going to be reviewing them in live Q&A sessions at the end of each of our presentations, we also will make sure that all questions asked get sent to the teams at our MegaCast here today. So the awesome humans from Veeam, Rubrik, Haiku, Palo Alto, Gigamon, and Sneak will be following up with you after we wrap to make sure that you get answers to the questions that you've asked. Now, all right, we were talking about the questions console. I want to draw your eyes on over to the Twitter button that's on your audience console there, because, hey, good things should be shared. So feel free to get social today, especially when you have one of those cool little brain light up moments. Make sure you share that with your friends. And when you click on that Twitter button, the hashtag for today's MegaCast is going to be automatically added to your post. Now, one last thing that I want to tell you about that audience console. So we talked about the questions, we talked about Twitter. We're going to come back to prizes. Hang tight. But I also want you to take a look at that handouts tab. It's right next to the questions tab. You're going to find some really awesome resources, takeaways from our speakers here today. Just an info-packed collection of data sheets, white papers, ebooks, upcoming events, lots more. So click on into that handouts tab, start exploring, download some of those resources to share and to read later. Now, if I haven't met you already, my name is Jess Steinbach with Actual Tech Media. I'm so happy to be one of your moderators for this incredible webinar today. And my wonderful friends and fellow moderators, Scott Becker and David Davis, are going to be joining us here shortly. But before we jump into those sessions, I said I would come back to talk about prizes, and I meant it. So here we are. Let's talk about prizes. So in today's MegaCast, you have a chance to win one of 10 Apple Watches Series 7. And that, guys, is not even including the $500 Amazon gift cards that we're going to give away every 30 minutes. Now, of course, you must be in attendance here at the live webinar in order to qualify for the prizes, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, no problem. I don't expect you to have those memorized. Head on back to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom. You can find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. Now, as I mentioned, we love all of your insightful questions. In fact, we love them so much that we're actually adding an additional prize for you here today. So we are going to be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked in each each of our live sessions. And it does not matter if we read your question out during the live session. So if we run out of time, we don't get to your question, but you got that question in, we will review them after we wrap, and then we'll follow up with that prize winner. So make sure that you get those questions in, both because it helps make the webinar awesome, and you could win a $50 Amazon gift card. That's just great. All right, a few quick reminders up on the slide here, so do take a look at that, including the fact that all grand prize winners are required to submit an IRS form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. And again, if you have any questions about whether or not you meet the T's and C's for prize winning today, you can find the full thing in the handouts tab for you there. Now, if you are a winner today, you do always have the option to donate the value of your prize to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media webinars, thousands of dollars have been donated to these charities that you see here. So if you are a winner today and you would like to get involved with one of these amazing organizations, just let us know. We would absolutely love to help make that happen. Again, we're so happy to have you all here at the live event. We want to keep that good feeling going. We want to connect with you. So be sure to find Actual Tech Media on Twitter and Facebook. We definitely want to hear from you. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. So many great on-demand webinars there on just about any topic that you could imagine. So click on over and start exploring those after we wrap today. Don't go anywhere just yet. While you're gathering together some cool resources, we also have a lot of great content for you on LinkedIn. So make sure that you find Actual Tech Media there. And speaking of cool content, I also want to make sure that I direct you towards the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide Book Club. The Guerrilla Guide Book Club gives you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. Now, one cool thing about these, they work on both your Kindle and your mobile device. Second cool thing, they're totally free. That's two very cool things. So be sure to download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide. There's a link for you in the handouts tab that we were chatting about earlier. So please do go check that out. Now, obviously, I'm a big fan of yours, and I want to keep getting to know your friends. I'm pretty sure you all have some awesome friends and coworkers who might enjoy an Actual Tech Media webinar. So another great way to win a prize is to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you're going to find a link to do that right there in that handouts tab. We keep coming back to that handouts tab. You'll also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar as well. I do want to promise you, because I get it, it's a concern. We're not going to spam your friends or your coworkers. We're going to send them an invite with some upcoming events that they might be interested in. And if they are not interested or they don't respond, we're just going to give them one more reminder message, and that's it. So that's all they're going to hear from us, and then we'll let that rest. But I'm guessing that they'll find something exciting in those first two emails, and they will be joining you for an upcoming webinar. So be sure to refer a coworker or a friend, and get them to come on to a webinar with you to attend, because you can share some really cool content. You can have like a webinar book club or something. And we hold a monthly drawing giving away a $300 Amazon gift card that you can each win. So make sure that you take advantage of that. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of information in a short period of time. Let's move on to our keynote.
And this keynote is extra fun for me because I get to bring in two of my very favorite experts, my fellow moderators here at Actual Tech Media, David Davis and Scott Becker. They are here today to give us some insight on how to strengthen AWS with third-party tools and services. David and Scott, thank you so much for being here with us to kick off the MegaCast today. I'm going to hand the mic on over to you.
David, thanks for joining me for a quick talk as we kick off the AWS MegaCast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Scott. I mean, cloud computing, AWS are especially exciting to me. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Me too. We're going to learn a lot about the ecosystem of partner tools for supporting, enabling, and extending AWS today. You've got so much experience with virtualization, with containers and cloud, and I know you've earned AWS certification too. So you're very familiar with this ecosystem. I'm really excited to hear from you a little bit about some of the big issues that people face right now with AWS. So I'm showing recent research data from Synergy Research Group from Q2 of this year, and this is enterprise spending on cloud infrastructure. You know, Amazon got that first mover advantage with cloud, and you can see here that Amazon is just not giving it up. Even as the overall cloud has ballooned in size and serious competitors have come into the field, Amazon just keeps sort of at that rock steady lead. And there's a reason AWS is taking over the world's infrastructure, David. Before we get into the challenges, what is it that AWS does so well natively that it accounts for its continuing success?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's just AWS never stops innovating. I mean, they're always ensuring that they're ahead of the curve. They offer new features, new services. And I mean, for example, depending how you count them, I just went through this. This is a little short video I recorded before we chatted here of all the different AWS services. If you log into your AWS Cloud Console, there are between 180 and 250 plus different AWS services. So, I mean, it's just kind of overwhelming. And then they have, of course, their geographic innovation with AWS Cloud spanning, they say, 87 different availability zones and 27 different geographic regions, with plans for 21 more availability zones and 7 more AWS regions around the world. So it's just incredible, the scope of the AWS Cloud and the breadth of their services.
That scope really is amazing. But, no matter how good your service is, there are always areas for improvement. And, I think it's part of the reason that AWS has always sought out and encouraged a robust partner community. Let's talk about the needs that those partners fill. What are some of the areas where customers need the most help around AWS?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like any other enterprise platform that you adopt, AWS is going to take a whole ecosystem of different solutions to make it comprehensive. AWS might have some smaller kind of entry-level services covering just about everything, but as soon as you need some more advanced features or some more robust, capabilities in some cases, you're going to start looking for a partner-based solution to help you do that. And it's no different than any other public cloud or, for example, VMware vSphere, on premises. It always took a whole ecosystem of solutions to make it, complete, really. And I mean, AWS has a very nice partner network, the APN, they call it, the AWS Partner Network, which is over 100,000 different partners around the world in more than 150 countries. And so as you can imagine, there's a whole lot more to it than just AWS. And they break up their partners into these 5 different categories. Some of us, may have used services, for example, to help, migrate to the cloud or analyze our cloud security posture, or maybe training partners. But I think most of us, when we think about AWS partners, we're talking about software partners, is what most of us think of. And I looked it up. There's over 10,000 different software solutions in the AWS marketplace. And they break down into the categories there on the screen. You see the 8 different categories. So business applications, data analytics, DevOps, infrastructure, IoT, machine learning, migration, and security. And so I know we've got a lot of partners even represented here on today's event.
Yeah, absolutely. And, 10,000 software solutions, that's a pretty amazing number. One of the segments that you mentioned there was security. Obviously, that's top of mind for a lot of people. What are some of the things that organizations need to keep in mind to make sure that their AWS deployments are secure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. Too many people, I think, or companies, migrate to the cloud maybe before they're completely prepared or educated. I mean, probably most of us heard about the Uber attack last Friday. That was where a hacker used social engineering to gain access to the Uber's internal network. They found high-level credentials in a PowerShell script that were hard-coded, and they gained access to almost everything that Uber has, including they were even posting screenshots of their AWS IAM configuration and permissions, their internal VMware vSphere, their Slack, everything. It's a very scary situation. I think it just reminds us, the importance of security and how simple misconfiguration, simple things like hard coding root credentials, not following the best practices really is what it comes back to, can catch even the largest companies out there. So I think it's important to either take time and learn what the best practices are and how to apply them yourself, or use some sort of partner or use some sort of tool to help you do that. And we've got a lot of great partners not only here on the event, but also out there in the AWS partner network that I'm sure can help with that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of them. Another area is cost management. Are there some basic tips there around, managing your costs with AWS?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit on security and now cost management. I think those are kind of the two top level concerns when companies think about moving to the cloud is, well, can we really be secure? And then what's the cost going to be? Once we move to the cloud, is it really going to be less expensive overall? And there's a lot of great tools. I mean, AWS has cost calculators. There's some great SaaS applications out there that help you to analyze your cloud cost, spending across not just AWS, but multiple clouds, and even help you compare that to on-premises. In fact, we're doing an expert series event coming up in the next month or two on that very specific topic, cloud cost control, managing your cloud costs, analyzing costs, ensuring that you don't overspend, and hopefully, save some money in the process. So again, it goes back to best practices, partners, or tools.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's going to be a great expert series. I'm really looking forward to that one. Well, David, thanks for being on and sharing your insights. Now I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about ways to improve AWS performance, security, and cost management from the rest of the sessions today.
Awesome. Let's get started.
Yes, David, totally agree. Let's get started. Well, now I've got a poll up on the screen here for you all. Some of you have answered this before. If you haven't, or even if you have, let us know. What we're curious about is when someone asks you, what do you do? What's your role when you're describing that at the 10,000 foot level? Do you say, I work in tech or I work in IT? If you would say something totally different, feel free to let us know in the chat. We would love to hear from you. But just kind of high level, tech or IT? All right, seeing a lot of the IT department out there today. So that's exciting. I immediately went to IT Crowd and started thinking about, have you tried turning it off and on? If you guys haven't watched that show, I recommend it if you like British humor. Anyways, I digress. Let's move on to our next poll. So up next, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So what we're really looking for here is we're talking about AWS. So you're going to learn a lot of cool things about AWS. When would you be looking to make some possible changes, enhancements, upgrades, complete rollovers to new things, whatever the case may be? What is your time frame? So let us know. Take a second now, and we'll just get an idea. And I'm seeing a pretty good spread, but a lot of not sures. And you know what? I've said this before, but I like starting a MegaCast with a lot of not sures, because what that tells me is that you guys are kind of exploring. You're in an exploratory phase. And that's going to be great for you today, because you're going to get a lot of information that may help you start to narrow in on that timeline. Well, speaking of which, let's say we get started with our amazing sessions here today, because I am so excited to introduce you all to our very first presenter in today's MegaCast, Rick Vanover, Senior Director, Product Strategy at Veeam. Now, Rick, I know that you've put together a pretty cool presentation for us this morning. I'm very excited about the light board, so thank you so much for being here to kick us off today. Let's get rolling.
Hello and welcome to this session. I'm Rick Vanover. I'm on the product strategy team, part of the office of the CTO here at Veeam, veeam.com. Be sure to check us out on the web. At the end of this session, I'm going to have a couple of QR codes and links for you to check out more information about what we're going to talk about. So what are we going to talk about? One thing today, AWS. The Amazon cloud, one of the leading ones in the market. We're going to talk about all the different ways you can think about backup in the cloud with Veeam. And a lot of times when you think about backup, that's the story of my life, but it's always the afterthought. And in particular, Veeam is a leader in the backup space. So I'm going to walk you through 4 corners here of how you can do some amazing things with backups powered by AWS. So let's start first with the marketplace. Now, a lot of you I love my acronyms, by the way, so I'm a horrible drawer, so bear with me here. So in the marketplace, if you don't know, you can download Veeam Backup for AWS. And a really cool thing about that is you can protect 10 instances for free. Now, when I say an instance, what exactly am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the various AWS services. So that would include, let's see, there's EC2, there's RDS, there's EFS, and there's VPC configs. So there's 4 right off the top things that are actually a really good way to start and what you can back up. And the first 10 are free from the marketplace. Now that's a great way to get started, some dev environments, just to, get familiar with backups. Now, what's interesting about doing this, you can do this in production environments as well, but I really like the administrative boundary that comes from the different AWS accounts. So if you have data in these 4 services here, I would recommend deploying Veeam Backup for AWS over here in a separate account, and it itself is EC2, and then have an S3 bucket that you would put the backups in. Because if you think about the whole nature of the cloud, building up and tearing down, you run a real risk of an organization accidentally destroying the backups. Like they just threw away a bucket that was something you need. So using that natural administrative boundary is really good. Now, of course, we can do more than 10. We can do that with our licensed products as well, but in the marketplace, it's a great way to get started. And I should also highlight that you can deploy that on premises too. So let's move the conversation down here. So if you're like me, you may have started your IT practice in a data center, doing internal IT. And if you think about what's on the estate today, virtual machines, files, physical servers, enterprise apps, and, if you're talking and thinking about AWS, you got to think about how I can protect all of this on premises as well, managing my cloud strategy. So one of the things that's really cool about Veeam is when we're protecting that on-premises estate, there's a technology called the scale-out backup repository. So that's where all your backup data goes, okay? Now, this is telling me a story of when I used to practice in IT for end users. It was a funny story of like getting storage on premises is not a problem. Well, actually it is nowadays with some of the supply chain challenges. But sometimes getting the money for it was the problem. So the cloud became this really nice extra target. And let's bring S3 back into the picture, and let's also keep that data safe because the ransomware threat is real. And so if I put my threat actor hat on, right, it's like there are plenty of things that can happen to your data. So the thought here is if we have this on-premises data, and I'm using this technology called the scale-out backup repository. So pardon the buzzword use, but it's a secondary storage system that is software-defined, cloud-ready, hardware-agnostic, really easy to use at the management layer. So what this is your backup data on premises can go with their first stop on premises. And actually in version 12 coming up later this year, we'll be able to go directly to object storage first. So we can even change the game there. So the thought is I'll keep a little bit of backup data here, but I have effectively an infinite amount to keep in the hyperscale public cloud. And I can use S3 Glacier as well for an archive class to really balance that retention scenario. And what I mean by that is you never want to be in a scenario where you're having to decide between your compliance of how much you retain and how much is your cloud bill. Don't tell me you've ever had to think about that, right? So a way to drive those costs down, that's a good one here with Glacier. Now we have this on-premises stuff, and this is actually driven, I should have mentioned this earlier here. Let's see if I can put this in here. This is driven by Veeam Backup and Replication. So this is the heart and soul of our Veeam Backup products. Now, if you're an organization that has an on-premises deployment like this, you're good to go, right? You can start using Amazon for your offsite backups right away. And you could also, instead of deploying through the marketplace, you could actually deploy this way. You could kind of go northbound, where you have your on-premises environment and you can, from a central management plane, protect those workloads in the cloud. Now, we do have a community edition, which, surprise, guess what? Gives you 10 free instances. Now, you'd have to use a separate marketplace free deployment and a separate community edition. But if you want to just try this, you can go to veeam.com. I'm going to have some links here towards the end of the session where you can get this information. But you can do that for free as well. See if I can fit that in. Not the best of handwriting, not the best, but hey, it's what we do. I don't want to have to do it twice because cleaning these things is real. So anyways, this is a good way to get backup data off-site. Now, in the backup world, we have this rule that we live by. We call it the 3-2-1 rule. 3 different copies of your data, 2 different media, one of which is off-site. So let's walk that real quick here. So this primary instance in the data center estate would be 1. Your backup copy would be 2 copies, and your third copy would be off-site. Now, I'm actually going to give myself bonus points because I'm also making it immutable with S3's object lock. Now, when we build data centers and services like this, let's see if this one works. We always have to prepare for things to go wrong. I mean, the fundamental promise of backups nowadays is the ability to recover. So we build on-premises things with the thought here of them going to fail. Whether it's fire, flood, and blood, or ransomware, pull the hat back up, right? We have to be ready for bad things to happen to good data. Now, this might sound like a really bad thing, right? Where we've lost everything on premises, but I really want to draw your attention to the copy up here, especially when immutability is in use. One of the cool things about the image-based backup format that Veeam have is that it's fully self-describing and recoverable and portable. So what I mean by that is I don't need to have any prior knowledge of this infrastructure that's failed. And with that, I can go to the website at veeam.com and download a trial or even the free edition, and I can drive recoveries from these backups in S3. I can restore them over to new EC2 instances very, very easily. The magic of that is that I don't need any prior knowledge of the infrastructure, and I can recover these workloads to EC2. And I talk to a lot of organizations that recover to the cloud, not because they want to, but because they have to. So think about ransomware, think about, critical site failure, think about not being able to get replacement parts. Those are some of the things that are challenges nowadays. And having the portability like this, it's great. You don't need a catalog. You don't need a media server. We don't even have the construct of that. All you need to do is know the encryption password of this data. So that's actually an important thing. If you're using the scale out backup repository and you're putting Veeam backup data into the cloud, I highly recommend that you encrypt it with your own password or someone else will. Okay. Now the thought is don't lose that password because you'll need that to drive this type of recovery here. And once you put it into Amazon as an EC2 instance, you can then start backing it up with Veeam Backup for AWS, right? So you could change the format. And the beautiful thing here is Veeam has this thing called an instance license, which will be portable. So it could be on-premises workloads today. It could be EC2 instances tomorrow. So that's cool. I like this. And again, I really want to highlight the ability to use S3 with object lock. That's a great technology, very easy, no additional Veeam costs to use that. The only thing I would highlight is, be careful on setting really long-term immutability, because trust me, you can't, you're kind of committed to that. I like to use on-premises immutability too with some of the Linux stuff that Veeam are doing. And that's what I call double play immutability, where I have one copy here that's immutable and one copy off-site that's immutable. But let's talk about one of the other cool services that are in the mix over in AWS. Let's go to Kubernetes world. So I'm not a Kubernetes expert, not going to say that I am. I have someone on my team who is, but the thought is sometimes with Kubernetes, that's an area where what I do here at Veeam, we have to do a lot of education around backup. And if you're not familiar with, we have Kasten K10, which guess what, has a free edition also. And we have a free edition that can protect a lot of pods for free. So it's like you could do plenty of a backup to get started with Kubernetes. And if you're doing large scale application deployments in EKS, so put it in Amazon terms, this is something you should absolutely consider. And guess what? It can go to S3 as well. And so this is a great way to protect that data, those applications. And what's also cool about the Kubernetes backup with Kasten K10 is that you can actually drive recoveries elsewhere. So for example, if you were running on-premises estate, if you were running, say, Tanzu or some sort of on-premises Kubernetes orchestration platform, K10 can put those backups in the cloud and drive recovery to EKS. So this could actually go both ways, right? So you can have application mobility, which is something that a lot of people don't really give enough credit to. It's one of those things that I think can make a big difference in your environment. So we're walking around the wheel here. We've got one more that we want to talk about. So when it comes to some of the current trends here today, and if I look at Veeam, again, we're a leader in the backup space. You can go to veeam.com to check us out. One of the things I like here is that at Veeam, we've really aligned to 3 key priorities. We've aligned to the cloud, so Amazon is at the heart of that, and we're working with some of the other cloud technologies as well. We also have taken security really central, so Object Lock is a great example. Setting the different account boundaries is a great example. Same thing with the capacity tier. I recommend that from the scale out backup repository. Put this S3 bucket here in a special account, So everything from just basic account management to the security strategy and multi-factor authentication is something that's coming from Veeam. Immutability in all the places, on-premises, Linux immutability. But kind of the third product strategy focus that we have here at Veeam is around Kubernetes. So this one gets a really good story, really good presence. And if you've ever played with Kubernetes, a lot of times people like to use some of the scripts for backups, but if you use Cast and K10, it by itself is a Kubernetes app. It'll be very easy to deploy. And then from there, very easy to back up and recover your Kubernetes app. But let's think about another cool data lake that's out there nowadays. One of the other kind of focus areas for us here at Veeam is around the software as a service space. So if you're like me, chances are your organization is using Microsoft 365. Now, a couple of years ago, this would have been the best story because, hey, my worst application on premises is gone. It used to be the Exchange server. Now it's up in this hosted service, and I don't have to worry about it as much from a storage perspective on here. Now, I look at Microsoft 365. What we're doing here at Veeam, we have a couple of services that we protect. One is Exchange Online, so that mail service. 2 would be Microsoft Teams, right? I mean, how many of us have meetings all day in Teams, right? And some of the shared workflows, it's like that becomes actually a data lake. If you think about some of the different work groups and what they've built and how they're collaborating, Teams is one of the places where it's at. SharePoint Online. And that is an interesting one because that service interacts with the other ones. It interacts with the one I'm going to get to here in a second, and it also gets into the Teams data structure, and it may even be driven by some of the email backing, right? And then the last one is OneDrive for Business. OneDrive, and it's specifically the business one, not the personal account one. OneDrive for Business is really that new file server. So if you think about what we're doing from a collaboration standpoint, what we individually are doing from how we move files in between. I don't myself use a file server so much anymore. I use OneDrive for Business. I use Teams to share it. I use these other constructs. Now, what's cool about this product, and I'll put the name up here, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. That's the proper name. That's the short name. This product, guess what? Can also back up 10 accounts for free, so 10 user accounts. So if you think about 10 mailboxes and OneDrive accounts and SharePoint sites, it's a good way to start. You can do that for free as well. But what is really cool about this service, and this is where I think having an Amazon-focused approach is nice, is that we can put these backups in S3 as well, right? Now, we've also announced at VeeamON that we're going to support immutability here as well with this product. But that's a roadmap bit, but currently we can put backup data in S3. So this is actually a really cool way that a lot of the different data sources can really be protected in AWS. So take these 4 core services in the cloud and remember the best practice. Use a separate account for the backups. And take this across the board. If you're using S3 as a backup repository in any of these products, if you can implement as much separation as possible, that's a very good idea. Again, just keeping the whole nature of the Amazon use case, building up and tearing down, keeping the backup data separate from that. You have that beautiful construct to be isolated and separated as such, I highly recommend it. Your on-premises journey, right? You can send that backup data into AWS, preparing for site failure, which we should be doing anyways. And then also, if you think about modern apps such as Kubernetes, those can be protected with Kasten K10. And there's a free offering all the way around. So if you go to veeam.com, you can actually find all of these different offerings. And again, at the end of the session here, I'm going to put up a slide with a few of the links to drive you to that. And I've got a colleague on the chat here as well. So if you have a question, we should be able to get an answer here typed to you. Sorry about not mentioning that earlier. But yeah, when I look about especially Glacier, S3, these three sources, on-prem 2, EKS there, Microsoft 365 data coming in. And actually, I'll also mention as another roadmap item, we will soon have a Salesforce backup product also eventually able to support the object storage as well. All right, well, that concludes this part of the session, and I'm going to show you some cool links here in a second. All right, I'm back at the desk. The Lightboard is fun, but let's get through some of the other details that we want to go over and share. So first thing I want to talk about is what is Community Edition? It's a great way that you can have on-premises workloads protected, and you can do that for free, up to 10 instances. It also includes file shares, and you can also use the free edition in the cloud as well to protect EC2 instances. So really good way to get started, Veeam Backup and Replication Community Edition. And it has a lot of great capabilities, recovery, replication, moving stuff around. I talked about, in fact, if you need to migrate something from on-premises to AWS, Veeam Backup and Replication is a really good way to do that as well. So you could take, for example, a physical server, virtual machines, and you can pick those up and restore those into EC2. You can do that for free with Veeam Backup and Replication Community Edition. And what's also cool is I mentioned also the Kasten K10 product. This is a really good way. A lot of people don't, really think that they need a Kubernetes backup, but the reality is, we talk to people all the time that having that Kubernetes backup is really, really important. In fact, the free edition will give up to 5 nodes in the sandbox there, right there. So 5 fully functional nodes, by the way. And you can run it in dark mode, but the main thing is application discovery, policy-driven automation, simple user interface, and end-to-end security, right? So you can really have good control over those cloud-native apps that you have in your environment. Now, I also mentioned that, sometimes the Kubernetes journey, depending on where you are, might be something to kind of, be some work. So I want to give you one of the first QR codes here. This is Project Pace. This is a fast way to get up and running with Kasten K10 to protect data services on your Kubernetes cluster. So for example, if you have if you have something in EKS and you want to protect it, you can do that right away. You can protect it really easily right there. So that's a pretty easy thing to keep in mind. And if you want to do that, you can go right to that QR code. Now, what I want to show you now is a little bit of a transition here. So let me see if I can do this. I'm going to go over to the marketplace. So this is AWS Marketplace, and hopefully you've used the marketplace before in your professional practice, right, to deploy stuff in AWS, and I've gone there a lot. But here's what I want to show you. If you just go in and search for Veeam, and when I say Veeam, it's just, you just need to put in the words, nothing more complicated than that. You just, put in Zoom right there, just zoom in, search for Veeam. That's all you got to do. So let's go take a look here. And you're going to see all of the Veeam backup or Veeam offerings in the marketplace at this point. So there's a number of different ones out there. Focus to the ones, first of all, with the current logo, right? You'll see a lot of different things, Kasten, and then, a lot of different things. But the ones put out by us would be the ones to start with, right? So let's go to Veeam Backup for AWS Free Edition. So here in the marketplace, very easy to find it. Protecting those services that I drew up, it's all right here. And if you want some of the details about what happens with the product after you deploy it, a lot of times people ask, well, what are the requirements? What does it need to do when it is deployed? Well, I want to draw your attention to the Help Center. So if you go over to let's spell it right, helpcenter.veeam.com, and you can go to this area for our technical documentation, and then just drop down the product that you need. And this, would be Veeam Backup for AWS, but this logic works for all the different products. You could go look at the user guide here, and it'll tell you what services are used, what prereqs and things like that, all the different like backend services. This is the list here. So again, you want to check this out, helpcenter.veeam.com. Great way to get started. All right, so then back Project Pace we talked about. Here's the QR code of all the things, right? So this is the one that will take you to the main free products page, right? This QR code right here. Just go on over to the veeam.com website or click on free tools and you can get there. But, across the whole, offering of our products, it's built into our product strategy to have a freemium or a free edition out there. So, and it also includes other clouds. So you might want to check this out. Just going over to that QR code. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you watching me draw horribly on the light board. But if you got any questions, you can bug me on Twitter at Rick Vanover.
I don't know about horribly, Rick. I thought you did a great job. That was a great presentation. And I was laughing out loud at your bad actor hat. That was really good. I think you definitely had a lot of fans in the audience out there today. We got a lot of high fives and thank yous. A lot of people saying they love that light board. I am a big fan of that as well. I really appreciate sort of walking through information visually. So really enjoyed that. Rick and I were chatting about that before the MegaCast, and we wanted to try it out, and I'm really glad that you all enjoyed it as much as we did. So thank you so much, Rick, for that incredible presentation, and hopefully we can do more of those together soon. Now you can all see that I have put up a poll question for you there. We would really love to hear from you. What additional information would you like to get from Veeam? And I've said this to you all before, but I want to remind you, this is again a great opportunity to make your life easier. Let Veeam know what information they can put directly in your hands. What can they hand to you that will help you get further wherever you're at in this research journey? So let them know what resources you would like, and they will put it right in your inbox, and then you don't have to go digging for it. So make your life easy. Click on that poll right now. I do want to let you know we're going to have to keep moving along in the presentation today. So I see so many questions coming in, and we're not going to get to all of them today. But some of you have already seen this. The Veeam team is here. I love saying that. The Veeam team is here answering questions on live chat. So keep those questions coming in. You will get answers back. Any questions that don't get answered during our live webinar today, we will make sure go to Rick and to Veeam, or Rickatron, Rickinator. I've seen a lot of good names coming from Veeam crew today. They'll follow up with you and make sure that you get some answers. So get those questions in, and we will make sure that you get an answer back. All right, and while you are filling out the poll, I'm going to give away some prizes, because why not? I'm in a good mood. Seems like you guys are all in a good mood. Let's give some cool stuff away. So we're going to start out with our $500 Amazon gift card. Now, before I do that, I do want to remind you all that you do need to be present here at the webinar in order to win. So $500 Amazon gift card going to Christopher Bogart of Pennsylvania. Christopher Bogart of Pennsylvania. And then we're going to give away one of those Apple Watches. This is a Series 7 Apple Watch, and that's going to go to Scott Bell of Missouri. Scott Bell of Missouri. So congratulations to Christopher on your gift card and Scott on your Apple Watch. Now I want to remind you we have lots more chances to win. Plus, that best question asked in each session. We'll be giving away a $50 gift card in each of our sessions. So keep those questions coming in. Even if we don't get to your question live in one of our presentations, we will be looking at all the questions asked after we wrap. Now, one last thing, I forgot to mention it earlier. If you haven't already, head over to that Handouts tab. Click on the Veeam link, because there's a really cool read in there called AWS Data Backup for Dummies. It's really fun. It's really engaging. Definitely worth checking it out. So even if you don't self-identify as a dummy, you will get something out of that. So click on that Handouts tab and go get that handout from Veeam. Okay, well, we're going to move it right along because we have we have lots more great sessions to get to. And up next, I am pretty excited to introduce our next speaker on the MegaCast. This is Jerome Knoll, Director of Alliances at Rubrik. He's got some great information for us today. Jerome, thank you so much for being here. I know that you have a lot to cover. We have a lot of Q&A we want to leave time for. So I'm going to hand the mic right on over to you.
Hi, I'm Jerome Knoll, Director of Alliances at Rubrik. And today, I'd like to tell you more about the Rubrik Security Cloud, so you can secure your data and secure your business. So today, as I go through the presentation, feel free to ask questions in the question box. We'll answer those when we get to the end. Thanks for attending today. Let's dive in. So Rubrik and AWS have had a long and close relationship. Rubrik was architected from the beginning to leverage public cloud. And so we've worked with AWS since our inception. Today, we have hundreds of customers and hundreds of petabytes under management. And Rubrik protects customers' data within AWS, on premises, and at the edge of their network. So we have deep integrations with AWS, and we're continually adding other integrations as we go forward. But today we support things such as AWS S3 Object Lock. We offer the ability to instantiate or boot up images within the AWS cloud, and we're also an AWS Outpost ready vendor. In terms of what we see happening in the industry today, we're seeing, I'm sure like you are, that ransomware is exploding. We also see that IT estates are becoming increasingly complex, and with everybody working remotely, it does a lot to essentially enhance or broaden the attack surface that can impact a company. So we also have seen, and I think our customers are seeing this as well, that those that are still running legacy data protection applications, they were never designed for ransomware, right? I mean, these legacy applications, many of which were designed 30 or 40 years ago, were really designed to recover a file that was deleted inappropriately by mistake, recover files off a disk drive that failed, something like that, or for DR, right? They were never created in an environment where ransomware was actively looking and hunting for backup systems to disable or encrypt them. And so the reality is that these legacy systems don't provide the type of protection that customers and companies need today. So on average, I mean, you see the statistics here, ransomware attacks are occurring every 11 seconds. And then if you look at the economic impact of ransomware, and you look at that $6 trillion in terms of cyber damages just in 2021, it would become the third largest economy in the world. It would be third to only the US and China. So if you're hit by ransomware, you essentially have two choices. One, you can pay the ransom, hope you get the encryption keys, and also hope that they didn't exfiltrate data, which they're going to sell in a black market or publish publicly. Or if you have a system like Rubrik, you can recover that data. And that's what Rubrik is all about, is protecting your data so that you can always recover and never have to pay the bad guys. Let's talk about Rubrik's evolution. Rubrik is designed for the convergence of data protection and data security. So Rubrik was founded in 2014. We shipped our first product in 2015. And really, we were the pioneer of zero trust data protection. So securing data from insider threats and ransomware was something that Rubrik thought about very seriously from our inception. Following that, we became the pioneer of cloud data management, essentially building on top of zero trust data protection to provide a platform approach so that the systems could be managed regardless of where they live, whether it's in AWS, whether it's on-prem, or at the remote edge of your network. And then recently, we've become the pioneer of data security. And this is all around other functionality that we're continuing to add around ransomware monitoring, investigation, sensitive data discovery, and threat hunting. So we're continuously monitoring and remediating any risk that we find in your backup stream to make sure that you always have a clean copy from which you can quickly recover from. So let's talk about the Rubrik Security Cloud. The Rubrik Security Cloud essentially secures your data wherever it lives across your enterprise to make your business unstoppable. And the Rubrik Security Cloud is composed of three main pillars: data resilience, data observability, and data remediation. So let's take a look at each one of these pillars in more detail. So the first pillar is Rubrik Data Resilience. And these are all the functionality and features that keep your data safe. So we have an intelligent data lock, so that a recycle bin that holds any recent changes for 7 days or a longer period, so that any admin action, can't lose data. And then this can also be integrated with the AWS S3 object lock for even longer retention. We also have retention lock, which is a feature that can allow two-person approvals for very specific admin actions or for changing the retention policies, so that a rogue admin can't go in and change policies that could then, delete data or turn off backups that we're running. We have access control at every level so that users get just the access they need and no more, thereby keeping the system safe. And we're logically air-gapped. This is really important in that Rubrik, while it sits on the network, it's not discoverable via normal protocols such as NFS or SMB. Because very often today, ransomware is looking, once it gets into your network, it's looking for backup systems, it's looking for very specific files, it's looking for the backup catalog. And if it can find that via NFS or SMB, it will attack that, encrypt it, because the ransomware writers know that if they can impact and encrypt your backup system, your catalog, your chances of paying that ransom suddenly got a lot higher. So we encrypt everything from the first time we take the image all the way to when we store it in AWS. It's encrypted end to end. And again, Rubrik is immutable by design. And this was from the beginning. It's a proprietary append-only file system, so you can only append to it, can't be modified. And all of those modifications, all of those append-only operations happen via secure APIs, and those are zero trust APIs to make it extremely secure. So data observability is the second pillar. So this allows the different applications that Rubrik has written to look for ransomware and scan your system to see if there's been any changes using machine learning. So we're looking at a series of images that we've taken to detect ransomware and changes that are out of the ordinary, thereby flagging it as unusual. And what's great about this is it shows you not only what's impacted, because that's one of the major issues that customers have when they're hit by ransomware, is they don't know what was hit. What is the blast radius of the infection? Is it just one server? Is it just a few files? Or is it everywhere? How big is the cleanup job going to be? Rubrik can tell you that, and this is one of the key advantages of the Rubrik technology. Second one is sensitive data discovery. So we're looking through all the images we've taken, looking for sensitive data such as PII, HIPAA, or any other sensitive data that you'd be concerned of. And this is really important because if you know that your data is clean, even if you're hit by a ransomware attack and that data is exfiltrated, you can sleep well knowing that there's nothing sensitive that is going to be exposed. Because if there was, you could be subject to other sort of regulatory fines and issues. So this is another area where the ransomware writers are using this to encourage you to pay the ransom. Because even if you can recover using your backup system, they will say, well, if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to release all the data that we exfiltrated, and then you're going to be in regulatory troubles. So knowing what is sensitive and taking action to eliminate that from the systems is super important. And then lastly, we're always looking for indicators of compromise. So looking through the time series of snapshots that we have to understand, if there's something there that needs to be remediated, when did it come into the system? And that helps us identify the last clean copy so that we can always recover a clean copy of data and not reinfect your systems. So data remediation is the last pillar. And Rubrik has a multitude of ways to recover data, right? We can recover a single file, we can recover a whole VM, we can recover a whole group of virtual machines or databases or whatever. We also have the capability to do what we call live mount, which is actually use the Rubrik storage to host the image running. So that allows the image to get up and running very quickly because we don't have to copy the data across the network to some other system. And so we've had customers with mission critical databases that absolutely have to have these things up, in seconds or minutes, live mount these things and run those on the Rubrik for weeks until they get other systems available, and then they can live mount that or they can move those over to other systems. The third pillar is Rubrik data remediation. And this is all about recovery. So Rubrik offers a multitude of ways to recover your data, whether it's a single file, whether it's a virtual machine, a mission critical database, or all the systems in a data center. So Rubrik also offers the ability to what we call live mount a system, which basically allows us to use the storage of Rubrik and then boot the VM and basically use Rubrik as that storage, which eliminates the need to copy that data across the network to another system. And we've had customers that have mission critical databases where they've actually had to get those back online in seconds or minutes. And they've live mounted those off the Rubrik and just left them running, for days or weeks until they get other systems stood up, and then they can live motion those from the Rubrik over to another system. So regardless of how you want to recover, Rubrik has a lot of capability and ways to recover your data extremely quickly. So a typical journey for a Rubrik customer, generally most of them start with Rubrik on premises. A lot of companies have a lot of data in their data center they want to protect. And what Rubrik does is basically take snapshots of all of those images and then keep a local copy for as long as the customer would like to have it locally, and then also auto archive that into AWS for that safe and secure and inexpensive storage archival location. So Rubrik also has the ability to do what we call cloud instantiation. So we can basically take those snapshots that we've taken and copied into AWS. We can convert those VMDKs into AMIs and essentially run those in the AWS cloud. Customers love this because they can then take those images, they can use them for reporting, they can migrate a VM from on-prem into AWS and just leave it there running, or they can do DR testing or a myriad of other sorts of solutions and applications. And lastly, of course, as you get more and more workloads in AWS, you need cloud protection there as well. And Rubrik offers software that runs within AWS. So again, regardless of where Rubrik is running, whether it's in AWS, what's in the AWS cloud, whether it's on-prem or at the edge, you can manage all of this from a single pane of glass. Rubrik has gotten a ton of industry recognition, and these are three of the ones that I think we're most proud of. The first is the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And in this case, we're in the leaders quadrant, and we're positioned furthest to the right. So according to Gartner, that's the most complete vision of any company in the backup and data recovery space. So we're very proud of that. We're also strongest in overall strategy in the Forrester Wave. And then we've been in the cloud or the Forbes Cloud 100 list for the last 6 years running. As I said earlier, Rubrik was founded in 2014, shipped our first product in 2015. And now I'm happy to report we have more than 4,500 customers. You can see from this list, we have major customers in every vertical. And a lot of these companies are large name brand customers. They can buy anything. They choose to buy Rubrik. Another great thing that Rubrik has done is release this ransomware recovery warranty, where Rubrik will pay up to $5 million if we can't recover your data from Rubrik. All that we require is, some requirements that you put in place, best practices that we've learned. But we like this because it shows to the industry our commitment to our recoverability, and customers love it because they say, yeah, Rubrik is great because they're putting their money where their mouth is. Customers love Rubrik. They also love Rubrik support. Our support team has an audited Net Promoter Score of 84, which is great. Our customer satisfaction score of 98.6. And in the Gartner Peer Insights, where customers rank and rate software that they're using, we have a 4.8 out of 5. So the feedback on Rubrik is great, which tells you a lot. And then finally, Rubrik is available in the AWS marketplace. We're available via our public listing as well as through private offers where we can put together custom configurations for you. And we find that there's a growing number of customers that are leveraging the AWS marketplace, and customers love the marketplace. Some of the advantages of transacting through the marketplace is anything that you transact through the marketplace can decrement your Amazon consumption commitment. So if you have an EDP with AWS, you can purchase things through the marketplace and that will decrement or burn down your consumption commitment. Marketplace, of course, greatly speeds the procurement and the deployment process of software, and also helps companies to consolidate their spend and reduce the number of vendors, thereby making their back office systems a lot more efficient. Well, that's what I have for you today. We have a really good tech brief that you can download that gives a lot more detail about ransomware and Rubrik. So I highly encourage you to download that and read that. Also, the Rubrik website is a great resource. Lots of information, lots of customer stories. You can learn a lot there about not only about Rubrik, but about ransomware and our solutions. And with that, I want to thank everyone for attending, and then we'll answer the questions that have come in. So thanks again for attending today.
Yeah, thank you, Jerome, for that really interesting presentation. We have a ton of great questions coming in, but before we jump into those, I do want to remind you all that I have put up a poll question for you here. What we're looking for is what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution? So Jerome just gave us a lot of really good information. I see Rudy's giving you a high five, a couple other high fives coming in already, which is awesome. So if you want to learn a little bit more, if you want to explore the solution a little bit deeper, make it easy on yourself. Tell Rubrik what information they can send you to continue that exploration. Well, Jerome, we've got a lot of questions to jump into. You ready to rock?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to start with one from Matt here. He's got a couple of questions for you, but he's wondering, does Rubrik have a way to first ensure that ransomware infection is stopped, identified, and removed before disaster recovery is initiated for restore?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Matt, I think I sort of touched on that in the presentation to some extent. But yeah, I think one of the really unique things about Rubrik is our ability to, scan all the images that we've taken, right? So we're doing, backups and taking images of your whole network and infrastructure, whatever basically you point us at. And then we're looking at that data over time. So we have these machine learning algorithms that are looking at those data sets, looking at those images. And what they do then is looking for anything that's really abnormal, right? Has there been lots of file deletions? Have there been encryption? I mean, what is out of the ordinary? And then it flags that, right? And so with that, then we know that if something has been, impacted by ransomware, we know what it is, which is really important. But really the big thing and the huge win, I think, for customers is the fact that it shows you the kind of the blast radius of what got touched, right? Because often when you get impacted by ransomware, you don't know exactly what was impacted. And so having that visibility is really good, because then you can focus on just recovering those assets, that were impacted, and not spending days and days and days like a lot of companies do trying to figure out what was impacted. And then you can just get clean copies of those, which Rubrik will tell you which the last clean copy that we have, and then we can quickly restore that. So yeah, we do have that sort of thing, that sort of functionality. And we also have the functionality to scan for sensitive data as well, which is also important, because ransomware today is really kind of a two-path or two-pronged approach, right? First, they want to encrypt your files and ask for the ransom. The second and really more hideous thing is they're exfiltrating data and saying, if you guys don't pay us, then we're going to make all your data public. And knowing that you don't have anything that is sensitive in the data stream or on your servers is huge, because then you say you know that you don't need to pay the ransom, right? They're not going to get anything. There's not going to be anything public that's going to hit you from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that visibility is so key, especially because we know in a critical situation that timeliness is in being able to take fast action. So not spending a lot of time figuring out what's been affected and being able to jump right in towards solutions. So a question from Christopher here, or Christopher. He says, I know this is more geared towards AWS, but does Rubrik also work well with protecting Azure and Google Cloud environments as well?
Yeah, we have the same products essentially on all the different clouds. So, Rubrik is a cloud neutral solution really. I mean, we were architected from the beginning to support public clouds, and so we support today AWS, Azure, and Google. So yes.
Perfect. Easy yes for you, Chris. Michael is wondering, yeah, that's right. I love when it's an easy answer. Michael's wondering, is the storage for Rubrik solution storage, is the storage for Rubrik solution storage by the customer in their own tenant or in a Rubrik tenant? Sorry, there was so many storages, I lost myself there.
Yeah, typically for AWS, the storage is gonna happen in the customer's tenant, and we support a broad range of storage services in AWS. So of course, S3 standard and frequent access. Of course, Glacier Deep Archive for things that you really want to put away for a very long time. And we've also recently announced support for Glacier Instant Retrieval, which is a really interesting storage class in that you get really, 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 deeply discounted pricing, but you have immediate access to that data. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that from our customers.
I'm going to ask another one of Matt's questions. Matt, you get a gold star today. You got lots of great questions coming in. And he's asking it in particular about higher education, but I'm wondering if maybe this applies to, across industries and people when they're in similar verticals. So Matt's wondering, what is the best way for a higher education organization to protect themselves against ransomware attacks? Should we go about it alone, or is it a cooperative approach with other universities, maybe a potentially better model to pool those resources?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, Matt, from what I've seen of our higher education customer base, everybody is implementing the Rubrik solution and using the immutability and storing the data typically in cloud, right, for additional safety, security, and fast access. So I think it's always good to network with other like-minded folks, in similar verticals. So I think, there's lots of industry trade associations and whatnot that you could join and work with other folks from the higher education. But I think the other thing too is there's a lot of other sort of security products out there that have very, very deep knowledge across, the whole industry. I mean, the whole world really. They're looking at what's coming in and, what other companies are seeing. So I mean, there's a lot of companies that offer this type of technology, but I think those are something on the security side that are very worthwhile to look into because, I mean, your view, anyone's single view is going to be limited, right? So you'll see what, one certain amount of the total internet, right? But if you gang a whole bunch of other, companies and institutions together, your visibility becomes much, much, much broader. And so then you can kind of gather from the bigger environment, what's happening. And maybe it's a geographic thing that started somewhere and maybe it comes, to your geo later, right? So that sort of technology, those solutions are out there. And I would, security is it's always defense and depth, right? I mean, it's never just one thing. It's a multitude of layers. And so I think looking at some of these other tools that are available in the market that provide that type of security insight are very interesting and worthwhile to better protect yourself.
Well, I love that answer and great question, great discussion. Jerome, I wish we could keep going because we do have lots more questions, but unfortunately we are going to have to leave it there. Before you leave us today, if somebody is really excited to get started with Rubrik, and I'm seeing a lot of fans out there, you're getting a lot of high fives and thank yous from the audience today. If somebody's ready to get started, what do they do? What's their first step?
Yeah, I think first step is go to our website, and look at this. We have a ton of information there, and there's a lot of resources that I would really encourage people to look at. There's great blog articles, there's great white papers. Look at that, and then there's a contact sales, URL there too. You can always just contact them, and we'll reach right back out to you and ask, how we can help.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Jerome. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon. All right. Bye-bye.
And for everybody out there that is looking to get some more information right away, Jerome mentioned in his presentation a document that he suggested everyone kind of check out. You can actually find that in your Handouts tab. So head on over to the Handouts tab and take a look at that. It's called Extending Rubrik Zero Trust Data Security to AWS Environments. It's a really interesting report. Looks at the threat landscape, zero trust, best practices, and more. So go check that out, download it, make sure you save that for later. And again, thank you to everyone who has filled out the poll. Also, thank you to everyone who is, there's just a really great positive vibe today. I'm loving all the high fives and the congrats. We've had some incredible presentations, and they're made even more exciting by all of you out there. So thank you for your participation. And hey, as an extra special thank you, I'm going to give away some prizes right now. So I'm going to remind you all that you do need to be present here at the MegaCast in order to win. And up next, our next winner of a $500 Amazon gift card. This is going to go to Melinda Smith of Kentucky. Melinda Smith of Kentucky, you've won a $500 Amazon gift card. And how about this time, let's do two Apple Watches. These are Series 7. So I'm going to give one away. Brian Singh of Vermont and Matt Lehman of Illinois. 1 and 2, Brian Singh of Vermont and Matt Lehman of Illinois. You have each won an Apple Watch Series 7. Congratulations to Melinda on your gift card, to Brian and to Matt on your Apple Watches. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. I do want to remind you there's lots of chances still yet to win, and that best question in each of our sessions. So even if we don't get to your question live, you are still entered to win that best question. And a reminder that your questions are going to the teams after we wrap, so you will get some answers back even if we don't get to it in our live discussion. But with that, let's keep rolling because, boy, the fun is not stopping. We have another awesome presentation on deck for you here. I'm so excited to introduce you all to our next presenter in today's MegaCast. This is Andy Fernandez, Director of Product Marketing at Haiku. Andy, thank you so much for being here today. And I know you've got some great information to share with us, so the platform is all yours.
Thanks for the welcome. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Haiku. And today's session is really going to be about data protection as a service specific to Haiku Protege for AWS. If you have any questions, we will make sure to get to you at the end. If not, we will personally reach out to make sure we address anything in the chat as well. And we have some exciting news for you as well, so please stay tuned to the end of the presentation. Now, just a quick mention about who Haiku is and who we are before we really get into today's subject matter. We are headquartered in Boston. We have more than 300 employees globally. We are a multi-cloud organization, a multi-cloud platform. This means that when you think about Haiku Protege and what we're able to deliver, think purpose-built for your infrastructure, whether you are on-premise or for today's conversation, you are using AWS for your backups at DR, or you're running production and using cloud native services without AWS as well. And that includes SaaS applications like Microsoft 365. We have a global presence. We have more than 3,200 customers in over 78 countries and growing. But let's get started to what we're here to talk about today. And before we get into this, there's a lot of different people in the audience today. You have folks who have been protecting workloads. They've been IT backup administrators their whole lives. They've done this from on-premise. They've done this to cloud, and they are experts in this field. You have this other growing area of people who are within DevOps, SRE, cloud architects, application owners who are now becoming responsible for these workloads that are provisioned in the public cloud, specifically AWS. And with that has come a myth over the last probably 10 years, and this is pretty much consensus now, which is the myth was data on AWS is automatically backed up. And 5-10 years ago, you heard this a lot. And there's an assumption that if I'm using the public cloud, it's resilient infrastructure, I don't need to back anything up. But the reality is, and AWS tells you this, it's a shared responsibility model. Of course, they have resilient infrastructure. That's part of the value add, but it's your data, your applications that you're responsible for. The same scenarios that you had to address on premises are the same disruptive scenarios that you see in the public cloud, whether that is human errors, right? Things like deletions, whether malicious or not, logical failures, ransomware attacks, outages, and even things that aren't disruptive scenarios but are required for you to follow through with your backup and data protection, which are things like long-term retention and compliance. But ultimately, all these scenarios, none of them are new to us. But what is new is the fact that we now have to protect them for these instances that live in the cloud. And that's why it's a common myth that we saw, but most people are pretty aware that, yes, I'm using AWS to host my data. I'm using their infrastructure, but I am responsible for this. Here's the challenge though. One thing is knowing that you are responsible for this data. The other one is actually protecting it. Now, if you think about most organizations, they've got data on premises. They've got data in the public cloud. They've got SaaS applications. Just being able to manage, to protect, and retain these workloads can be very difficult, can be very time consuming. There is a lot of time, resource, and labor spent keeping the lights on, right? I always use the image here of Sisyphus because that's what it feels like sometimes. You are using so much of resource to be able to simply make sure that your data is available to you. There are several reasons why, especially let's talk about just in the public cloud. One, it takes a lot of time and resources. It could be very costly to be able to protect your data. It is error prone. If you think, especially when you're thinking about protecting EC2 instances, there is a lot of manual work required. There are a lot of scripts required. You have to be able to scotch tape together a series of services and integrations to be able to perform a file restore, to be able to have full visibility into your applications. When you add something like cross-regional recovery and DR to that, it adds to this extensive list of things that you have to keep track of. And when you expand beyond just protecting your workloads in the cloud and you address all of your other responsibilities with SaaS on premise, you now have these massive amounts of data silos and a sprawl to protect them, right? You have a virtual backup, you have a SaaS backup, you have your cloud backup, or you're using, AWS backup for this. And now you have multiple interfaces and multiple different types of protocols that you have to follow in order to protect that data effectively. And then you throw cyber attacks in there, and it just adds to the chaos. So what we see is that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resource. It's not a perfect solution that we have for organizations who are protecting hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure. Now, let's think about this then. We've mentioned a lot of issues, we've mentioned a lot of these pain points, but when you're thinking about protecting your workloads in AWS, what should you do there? What should you plan for? How should you look at a selection criteria? And with that being said, one of the things that I want to provide here is very exciting news around a free, simple, and automated backup service for AWS. One of the things that I want to mention too is you have AWS backup. And AWS backup provides you a lot of features. The problem is you don't have that much time in the day. You have a day job, especially if you're within DevOps, you're a cloud architect. There's so many other things that you need to do. With this free service that Haiku is delivering, there are no more scripts required. This is a fully managed service, and there are no billing rights required. So let's actually talk about what this free service looks like. One, it's free, fully managed backup. Think about your EBS snapshots and having to manage those and being able to, at this point in time today, do you have full visibility into your instances at any point in time? Do you have full notifications when everything is going well and when everything goes bad? Do you have the ability to quickly perform a file level restore or simply restore an instance? What about cross-regional recovery? How much time are you dedicating to these things? So our goal here was to provide a free, a simple and automated service where you're able to protect this, where you're able to offload all these protection responsibilities and simply allow automated policies to take place. And so this free tier of Haiku Protege, think of it as automated snapshot management. One, it's built natively for AWS, so you're using native EBS snapshots, and you're able to protect your EC2 instances natively. Because it's been built, no agents, it has a cloud scale architecture that allows you to match your AWS scale. This is working on your storage. This is 100% SaaS. There are no maintenance, no upgrades, no installations to do. One of the things that we pride ourselves within this service is that it's DevOps enabled, meaning there's a self-service element where anyone without any type of learning curve can come in and within 15 minutes, not only start protecting, but already experience how easy it is to perform a file restore. And we want to make sure that it's automatically inherits your identity access management as well, to make sure that not only are you protected, but you're doing so in a secure manner with your credentials. One of the key areas here is being able to save time on your backup and recovery operations, not only on configuring these backups, but also on performing rapid recoveries. So with this backup and recovery service, as I mentioned, it's agentless, it's native, it's impact free. This is not the baggage that you get with your traditional legacy on-premises backups. This is a cloud backup service that was built for it. You're able to recover an entire instance. You can perform folder, you can perform file level restores and recovery. When you do this, Haiku Protege will automatically discover all of your instances. You simply select one, assign a policy. When that backup is complete, you have a full catalog of your file restore, select it, in a couple minutes you're done. No more guessing around your RTOs, no more waiting around making sure that did this script execute correctly. You have several automated backup policies to choose from. All you need to do is set your retention settings and how you're able to back these up, and you're able to perform free storage snapshots using EBS. And one key issue that comes up a lot is, you don't want to offload your storage requirements or have your data stored by somebody else, even if it's in AWS. You want to have full control of this data. You do not want to go through a lot of security or compliance barriers. You want to be able to simply start protecting very quickly. And that's why with Haiku Protege, you have 100% data sovereignty and visibility. We do not store anything. You have full control, full ownership of your data. All Haiku Protege, especially this free tier, does is offload all the manual labor required to perform effective backup operations. And so not only do you have 100% data sovereignty and control, but you have complete visibility of your protected instances at all times. Even when you go through our tutorial, you can enable notifications in one click, and you'll able to understand exactly what's going on when something goes well and when something goes not. You have full monitoring and reporting available to you. These are critical elements, especially if you're somebody who has a day job. You're responsible for protecting these workloads. We have so many other things to do. This is a free service where you don't even need your billing rights, just your account ID. You can get started without any capacity limits, any type of time limits. There are no strings attached here, and you're able to use this service. Now, we've talked about a very specific use case here, which is simply, can I perform snapshots and can I recover my instances and files from that? But as we know, data protection is so much more beyond just backup recovery. It's about making sure that your organization is resilient from cyber attacks. We know that ransomware attacks continue growing in volume and severity, and that applies to the public cloud and your workloads and applications that live there. So you have to think from a cyber resilience perspective. How am I protecting my data? How am I protecting my applications? Are they vulnerable to an encryption? If something happens tomorrow, will I end up having to pay a ransom? How much downtime will I have? These are questions that are very important to consider during your evaluation of a data protection service, especially in the public cloud. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the challenges that organizations have in the public cloud is because they are already responsible for managing a lot of applications that run on premise. So you have to make sure that when you're selecting data protection, when you're looking to become resilient, even cyber or IT resilient, you need to make sure that you are addressing a hybrid or multi-cloud strategy. Most organizations, you might be running in other public cloud workloads, or you might be running on premise and even SaaS. You have to make sure that as you manage all of your applications, regardless where they are, that you have unified management that's simple and that's cost effective, and that you don't have a sprawl of tools in order to just keep the lights on. The other area is disaster recovery, right? As I mentioned, outages still happen. They happen on-prem, and they happen in the public cloud as well. And you have to make sure that you're ready, that you have simple failover, seamless failover, whether it's to the cloud or cross-regional recovery in the cloud. You need to make sure that you're able to address this as well. But here's a critical one, and I think one that's very relevant in the public cloud space: reducing your total cost of ownership. It's very easy to attach services and solutions as your workloads grow and their responsibilities grow as well. But the focus is you have to design this with low TCO in mind. How do you reduce your infrastructure costs, the resources, and the time that is required to maintain them? These are critical elements to think just beyond this free backup service that we've talked about. And that's where Haiku Protege for AWS comes in. right? This platform that we're offering of services that is available for AWS, for Azure, for GCP, for VMware, for Nutanix, and is purpose-built for each one of these. Now, a lot of you are in different areas right now. You're in different journeys within the public cloud space. There are some folks who are explicitly on premises and are looking to just back up to AWS, to S3, even for ransomware protection as well. There's some of you that are now actively performing backups and failing over to the cloud, or even thinking about a migration, about lifting and shifting. And there's some of you that have fully adopted public cloud and have fully adopted AWS space and even have a multi-cloud strategy. Haiku Protege for AWS gives you application and database aware backup, DR, and mobility throughout your cloud journey. Because we're a multi-cloud organization, because we deliver purpose-built protection, you have the ability to easily protect applications as they're meant to be protected and manage them in one space. So for example, if you're thinking about using AWS as a backup target, you're able to do so very quickly. You can use Haiku Protege to lift and shift risk-free without disruption to the public cloud. And as you mentioned, not only can you do so for free, but you can have full data protection of your instances in AWS as well. Now, this is what I like to call fully managed data protection as a service for AWS. And the mention I put a lot of emphasis on as a service is because when you think about the benefits that you unlock with AWS, right? You moved away from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. You pay as you go. You only pay for what you use, and you do so on a monthly basis. Why would you bring in a solution that was built with a legacy traditional data protection operation in mind and bringing in perpetual licenses, CapEx models into the public cloud, right? If you're using infrastructure as a service, the tools, technologies, and services that you use to protect these workloads must also be as a service. And with Haiku Protege, there's zero deployment, zero maintenance, and zero configuration. You simply will subscribe, add the instances that you want to protect, assign the policies, and you're done. This can be done in a couple of minutes. And we've seen people who have used this, even in our free tier or in our paid tier, who can get up and running in a couple of minutes. And this is true backup as a service that's hosted within AWS Cloud. You do not need to perform any more sizing and planning exercises. Haiku Protege uses cloud scale architecture. It matches AWS limitless scale, scales up and down when you need it to. No more extensive sizing and planning exercises for protecting instances in the cloud. And you're able to make sure that you address your cost savings as well. We talked about reducing TCO as a critical element. It's a cloud smart design. It's balanced for any region within AWS. And ultimately, as we know, most organizations that we're talking to today, especially in this audience today, you have probably a hybrid cloud strategy, maybe a multi-cloud strategy. How are you managing all those? Can you visualize all of your protected applications in one place? The answer is probably not. And maybe you're using the same solution, but you're still using different interfaces to be able to address each of these applications. With Haiku Protege, you have a unified backup and recovery solution. You can protect, you can manage, you can perform your backup recovery, you can perform DR, you can perform migrations from the same interface for your on-premise applications, for your public cloud, and even for SaaS as well. Think of it as a true single pane of glass for all of your workloads that gives you unified management. And the other area that we've talked about too is you have to make sure that what you're using when you protect your workloads in AWS or anything else in the cloud that is cloud native. As we talked about too, we still have to make sure that we reduce your TCO, and that's why we've designed Haiku Protege with backup storage efficiency. You have incremental forever and dedupe backups with auto tiering, so you can use the right storage tier that works for your organization, for your SLAs, but also for your cost expectations. You have granular rapid recovery, not only around the paid version of Haiku Protege, but on the free tier as well, where you can easily recover files, folders, VMs, and disks across multiple regions. And ultimately, because this is cloud native, because we're not simply retrofitting an on-prem backup solution, there are no need for agents, and there are no performance penalties that come from agents. You are using your EBS snapshots, your native AWS snapshots to protect your EC2 instances. There's not an additional snapshot or an additional performance penalty that comes from Haiku Protege. And here's a very important one as well. It's making sure that your backups are immutable, that you're using, whether it's on-prem to AWS or even in AWS, or you're leveraging object lock, and you are making sure that your backups and your copies of your data are safe in case the event of a ransomware attack does happen. And I've gone on today a lot about not only our free tier, but what Haiku Protege does for you, regardless of where you are in your cloud journey. But one thing I did want to mention is there's a reason that we were named a visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And it's because of this vision of being able to say, we know organizations are going to have applications everywhere on disparate infrastructure, and there are going to be silos that come from that. We want to be the only true platform, the only true vendor to allow you to manage them all from one place without sacrificing native build, meaning protect VMware with a native VMware service, a native Nutanix service, AWS protected natively, but do so all in one place in unified management. That is the reason why we were named a visionary, and that's the reason why we're going to be in this space for a very long time, driving a lot of value in the public cloud. And according to DCIG as well, we were named as a top 5 AWS cloud backup solution, not only for large enterprises, but also for mid-sized organizations. So these are some of the things that we can include links for you as well to read up on. But what I wanted to leave with you today was something very exciting. I talked about this free tier of AWS at the beginning, this free service where you have backup and recovery, and you have your storage snapshots, and you have full automation for them. If you scan this QR code, you can simply register for it. You do not need billing rights. You do not need a credit card. All you need is your AWS account ID, and within 15 to 20 minutes, you can be up and running and protecting your native instances as well. So with that, I'm going to leave a couple of seconds for you to be able to scan this. We'll make sure to also drop a link in the chat in case you want to just register from your laptop or PC, and we'll go from there. But with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I know that we have a couple of questions that have come up.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that awesome presentation and for sharing. Congrats on all the acclaim. That's really exciting. And I love this QR code. Well, let's leave this up while we're doing some Q&A, and then folks will have lots of time to kind of to get that rolling.
Perfect.
All right. Well, we definitely have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and I want to make sure that we can get to as many of them as we can. So, Andy, you ready to dive into some Q&A?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So let's start with this one. We have an audience member wondering if there's any capacity or time limits on the free backup service.
No. On the free backup service, this free tier, it's a limited feature set where you can perform snapshots, you can perform file restore, complete instance restore, even cross-regional DR. And those are the features that you would get. You do not have the auto tiering, you do not have the ransomware proof backups, those type of things. But with that, there are no time, no capacity, no limitations. Once you subscribe to that, it is yours for life to use for free.
Okay, well, that's exciting. I like no limitations. That's always a good thing to hear. How about this question here, wondering about billing rights. Do I need billing rights?
No billing rights, no credit card requirement. All you need is your AWS account ID. Once you add that, we auto discover your instances, and you simply select the ones that you want to protect in a couple of minutes.
Okay. How does Haiku handle snapshots?
Yeah, and that's something that's always interesting because a lot of folks, even though people claim cloud native, realize those snapshots are not native to AWS. For Haiku Protege, they are. We're using your EBS snapshots. These are your native AWS snapshots. We do not throw anything on additionally.
Perfect. Loving these easy answers. Okay. We are cruising through this. This is great. Let's see. Let's get to another one here. Can I use Haiku to back up on-prem apps to the cloud? That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. You can use Haiku on-prem for your applications on Nutanix, applications on VMware, even Dell PowerScale, and then you can leverage the public cloud as a DR target site, right? So you can use AWS as a DR target site or for backup storage as well. And then you can select tiers that you want, and you can manage them all from one place. If you are protecting native instances, and you're also protecting on-prem applications, you can still manage them from one place, which is a huge differentiator as well.
Awesome. Okay. Here's a good one, especially because this is top of mind for a lot of people in our audience. Does disaster recovery come with an additional cost?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. And the reason a lot of people ask it is because a lot of vendors will include disaster recovery in their portfolio, but it's a separate SKU, even a different license, and even different management console most of the time. With Haiku Protege, we want to make sure that you can perform all of your operations, whether it's backup, DR, or migration, even just simple management, within one place. And so DR is not a separate SKU, it is included in what you get with Haiku Protege for AWS.
That's awesome. Yeah, really important. Well, I'm glad we clarified that. And I'm going to ask this one as well, because I know today we're here, we're talking about AWS. We have someone in the audience wondering, is Haiku AWS only?
Yeah, that's always a great question. Haiku Protege is available natively to protect with purpose-built protection for the platforms that I mentioned, right, which is Nutanix, VMware, Dell, but also the public clouds as well. But we really pride ourselves on our AWS offering and how we've able to deliver this top-tier service there.
Well, and clearly lots of people agree with you as visionaries, so that's pretty exciting. I wish we could keep going, Andy. We are running a bit short on time, so we're going to have to wrap it there. I do want to remind you all, as Andy mentioned right at the top, if we didn't get to your question in the live Q&A session today, don't worry. We're going to make sure that they get to Andy, to the Haiku team, and you will get a follow-up from them. Andy, before you head out today, if somebody is amped up, ready to get started, obviously we've got the QR code as a great place to jump in. Is there anything else that you'd recommend for getting rolling with Haiku?
Yeah, we'll drop the link in the chat as well. There's no better way for you to get started and experience the value here than to simply try the product for yourself. We have a quick start guide. Within 2 or 3 pages, you have every answer to any question around how to get started and making sure that you're able to not only auto-discover your instances, automate their protection, but also perform a file restore within a couple of minutes. And so my recommendation is actually just try the product.
That's a great recommendation. That is always the best place to start. You can talk and talk and talk, and it's all sort of ideas and intellectual until you really get your hands in the sandbox. So I think that is a great place to start. And thank you again, Andy, for being here with us today. What an exciting presentation and a great chat.
Thank you so much.
All right, and you can see I've got that poll question up for you again. So we want to know what additional information, boy, I'm talking a lot today, what additional information you would like to get about the Haiku solution. I saw we had a high five for the name. I also really like that name, Robin. I think it's quite nice. And I'm open to haikus if anyone out there has any. All right, well, please do take a moment to fill out that poll. Let us know what information you would like to get from the Haiku team. I'll say it again, this is this is the easy button, right? You're just telling Haiku, this is what I want. This is how you can follow up with me. This is what information would be helpful to me at this stage in my journey. So please do let them know how they can follow up with you and make sure that you get the right information that you need. So while you're taking a moment there, I do also want to remind you that in the chat, so Andy gave me that link, I posted it in the chat to get started with the AWS free tier, and then you can also go to the handouts tab and you can click on the Haiku link there in the handouts tab. So either in the chat or in the handouts tab, you can find that link, but definitely go check that out and get started on that. Absolutely the best way to kind of get to know the Haiku solution. And while you are answering the poll or while you're getting to know Haiku a little bit more, I'm going to go ahead and give away some more prizes. So we are just another reminder, you do need to be present here at the webinar in order to win, but we've got a $500 Amazon gift card for you. And we're going to give one of those to Alan Johns in Utah. Alan Johns, you have won a $500 Amazon gift card. And then we're going to do 2 more of those Apple Watch Series 7. So one of those going to David Heiscox of Maryland, and one going to Tom Kelly of New Jersey. Tom Kelly of New Jersey, you have each won an Apple Watch, that's Series 7, and Alan, you won a $500 Amazon gift card. We're going to follow up with all of you after we wrap today, so stay tuned for that. And I'm going to remind you there's more chances to win and more chances to get that best question asked card, so please do keep asking those questions because we will look at all the questions after we wrap. But we're going to keep cruising right along because we've got a lot left to cover today. So up next, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our next exciting presenter in today's MegaCast. This is Greg Smith, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Palo Alto. Greg, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm really looking forward to hearing what is up at Palo Alto. So I'm going to hand the mic right on over to you.
Thank you, Jess. All right, let's get into it. So Palo Alto Network software firewalls are really designed for any cloud, any network, all secured. So let's talk a little bit about why that matters. And what we're seeing in the industry and from many of our customers is that their ultimate drivers of hybrid and multi-cloud infrastructure come from these 4 areas. The big push for cloud migration, right? Get there quickly, save time, save money, all those wonderful attributes that get assigned to the cloud. But then there's other folks that are trying to be cloud native from the beginning. How can they take advantage of these things from the start, from the inception of their business? Then there's another side of, hey, that lift and shift, if you will, this data center virtualization. How do we make sure we can make everything we've got on site more modern? And then there's the software-defined branch side, which really cares more about how they can bring the right type of security, the right type of infrastructure, all to the same retail area, the industries, the healthcares that they're in that are highly regulated. So this is a pretty big and aggressive push. But what we're seeing is network-based threats still apply. So let's start with the why. Why is network security, and more specifically, next-generation firewall, needed in the cloud? And if we look at recent threats that have impacted the cloud, such as top of mind here with Log4j, it impacted 3 billion plus Apache servers, and most enterprises are still dealing with these after effects. We're not done dealing with Log4j, and new similar vulnerabilities like Spring 4 Shell were announced, and it only gets worse. So then we see Revel, which ultimately is ransomware as a service, coming in here collecting 123 million in ransoms already. And then Bashlight, which was a DDoS attack that affected 1 million Linux devices. And what we're seeing again, network is the common denominator for all these attacks, and this is why network security is so crucial for the cloud. So why do you really need this? The biggest network-based threat that we see comes from allowed outbound connections. Applications need to connect to the internet for downloading software updates using external APIs such as Facebook and Google, so you have to allow these connections. But once you do that, your workloads are also now allowed to download malware, connect to command and control servers, and exfiltrate your critical data. If you protect these outbound connections with an NGFW, it can automatically block the malicious connections and save you from ransomware, command and control, and data exfiltration. The second risk comes from unknown and unpatched vulnerabilities. Look, as an industry, we're all trying to shift left, patch the vulnerabilities well before the applications go into production. But there's really 2 reasons why you'll never truly reach that nirvana state. First is the unknown vulnerabilities. Example, like I mentioned, Log4j existed for 7 years before it was found and announced as a CVE. So there might be hundreds of such vulnerabilities out there being exploited by attackers, and you can't patch them because you don't even know about them. Next is delays in patching. It takes enterprises weeks and even months to patch these vulnerabilities. So you're exposed while you patch. If you have all the inbound connections protected by an NGFW, it can block attackers from exploiting these vulnerabilities while you work on patching, buying you critical time as a compensating control. The third risk is the east-west connections between the applications. To follow the true zero trust philosophy, you need to protect inbound connections not just from the internet, but also coming from other applications. Otherwise, you run the risk of someone breaking into the app that's connected to the internet and then spreading laterally to other applications. So our unique approach is like this. Right? Truthfully, we continue to deliver to our customers the best-in-class network security protections. We've got 10 years of Magic Quadrant leadership here. We've been a leader in the Forrester Wave. So it's not just somebody on a webinar telling you these are really high-end protections. They've been validated from third parties. We also emphasize cloud use cases, form factors, and consumption to make it easier for customers to embrace this cloud life. And then further, we always focus on the automation, making the strength between your security team and the software stronger each and every day we can. And finally, ensuring all of this is centralized. If you can't centrally manage this, it's not really helpful for you as a team. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these examples. So first, I mentioned from before, secure any network, all clouds, right? So focusing on any network, giving you the ability to respond and expedite network security with cloud and DevOps speed. Our best-in-class NGFWs, again, according to Gartner and Forrester, take on emerging threats everywhere. How about all the clouds? Protect your applications, whether you lift and ship existing applications to the cloud or develop new cloud-native applications. Our software firewalls can be deployed in any cloud with ease using cloud-native tools and processes. And secured. Look, let's be honest. You don't want to settle for just good enough. Stop the most sophisticated attacks in real time. Secure your workloads, outbound web traffic, as they connect to legitimate web-based services. Prevent malicious inbound connections that may exploit vulnerabilities, and cut off lateral movement for any threats that may already be present in your environment. So now I went a little bit more into like, why should you care? What's going on? Let me tell you how we've been doing this. So as an overview, Palo Alto Networks, I'm sure many of you are aware, have long-standing hardware firewalls for maybe 16, 17 years now, I believe. But about 10 years ago, as we saw customers moving to software and cloud, we delivered software firewalls. And first it was the VM series, the virtualized version. And then a few years ago, we delivered CN series, which is a containerized version. And earlier in this year, we launched Cloud NGFW, which is Palo Alto Networks' best-in-class NGFW, delivered as a managed cloud-native service for AWS. But what makes Palo Alto Networks really powerful is that all these form factors are powered by PAN-OS, our security operations system, and the cloud-delivered security services that you see on the top of the platforms here. The real threat intelligence comes from these cloud services. We started with threat protection, URL filtering, wildfire, and global protect early on. But in the last 4 to 5 years, we've added a whole bunch of new subscriptions to address new security use cases and add more and more each year. DNS, for example, protects customers against the DNS-based attacks. DLP allows them to prevent data loss exfiltration. And IoT, naturally, is for IoT security. These services make extensive use of AI and ML to stay ahead of attackers. It's augmented by our Unit 42 team of 200 plus threat researchers that are keeping an eye on the overall threat landscape and feeding the human intelligence into these cloud services. So last year, we got Panorama as our management platform that brings consistent management and visibility across all of this. As I mentioned before, without that consistent management, it's not all that helpful for folks. This platform approach, combined with the breadth and depth of security, is what allowed Palo Alto Networks to completely disrupt the industry 16 years ago and become a leader. So now that we talked a little bit about the platform, how do we actually deliver industry-leading security efficacy? So we have 85,000 plus customers that have deployed our NGFWs and endpoint protection agents across the world. Our ML-powered threat analysis engine analyzes over 15 trillion transactions every day. This analysis is further augmented by the 200 plus threat researchers from our Unit 42 threat research team. These researchers provide further in-depth analysis of newly discovered threats, as well as expert understanding of the overall threat landscape. The result is 4.3 million unique security updates released and 224 billion threats blocked every single day to ensure that our customers are protected from the ever-evolving threat landscape. By leveraging the network effect of our large global install base, we minimize the mean time to detection of these threats for all of our customers. And I'm sure you would love to have that opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about the use cases. Our customers are migrating to public cloud and are really looking at 3 main key business outcomes: how to accelerate their migration to the cloud, lift and shift of existing applications, extending the zero trust principles to public cloud and on-prem, and adhering to regulatory or industry-specific compliance requirements. And this drives the requirements for network security in public cloud. The ability to deploy the right security controls to protect cloud applications and workloads to protect from threats is top of mind for customers. There are 3 primary security enforcement points in the cloud. Outbound perimeter security, right, protecting the attacks like data exfil and command and control. Inbound security, to protect from break-ins originating through the internet or external entities. And lateral threat propagation, or what we commonly call east-west security. This is about protection within the trust boundary where if an asset or workload is compromised, how do we minimize the propagation of the threat across the other assets within the trust boundary? Our firewalls provide coverage across multiple cloud architectures. Customers can deploy full security stack along with other cloud-native assets like load balancers through Panorama, workflows, or third-party automation tools like Terraform, Ansible, and CFTs. We have a pervasive presence in all major cloud providers with BYOL, pay-as-you-go marketplace offering, making it really easy for you to transact how you prefer to transact. So let's talk about a customer example. Here we have a large Canadian retailer who ultimately was looking for cost savings, so reducing the cost of operating infrastructure, the physical data centers, automation, faster security provisioning to keep pace with the infrastructure provisioning, right? And management simplicity. They ultimately wanted to manage security across GCP and Azure from a single place. So what did they get? Since they have 10 million per day in revenue, now it's secured through VM series NGFWs. They can now comply with financial regulations in public clouds, streamline firewall deployment and configuration through automation, and time savings from consolidated management of Azure and GCP network security in a single place, no longer having to trade everybody in every different type of console. So here's another one that I mentioned before, our Cloud NGFW recently launched this year. So what is it? Cloud NGFW is Palo Alto Networks' best-in-class NGFW delivered as a managed cloud-native service on AWS. Under the hood, the service is powered by VM series and uses AWS Gateway Load Balancer technology. It can be deployed in just a few clicks or a simple API call. It brings our best-in-class security capabilities like App ID, threat prevention, directly to you. And these are capabilities that Palo Alto Networks is absolutely known for. We are the first third-party vendor to integrate with AWS Firewall Manager, so customers can now consume it at scale across their entire AWS organization. Cloud NGFW is delivered as a managed cloud-native service for AWS, so it's the easy button. It allows customers to focus on what they really want and gain that security for their AWS deployment. All they have to do is define their security policies, route traffic to the Cloud NGFW endpoint in their VPC, and they're gone. They're done. So what are the use cases? The first use case is inbound, right? As we talked about before, for workloads that receive inbound traffic from the internet. You can use Cloud NGFW to protect these workloads from inbound exploits, malware, by using App ID and threat prevention subscriptions. And then, for example, when Log4j was announced, we released protection for Log4j exploits in a day. So our customers were automatically protected from these exploits right away while they worked on patching their workloads. The second use case is outbound connections to the internet. Most workloads have to connect, right? So downloading software updates, consuming external APIs and such. Cloud NGFW with threat prevention and advanced URL filtering, along with App ID, can ensure that these outbound connections are legit and not command and control connections resulting in data exfiltration attempts. The third use case is preventing lateral movement across VPC by using App ID and threat prevention. So let's talk through a use case. Here's an example scenario, which is exactly why we built Cloud NGFW. This customer is a healthcare solutions company with end customers that are healthcare providers or healthcare labs. They needed to expand their AWS footprint at the same pace they were expanding their customer base. So the requirement was serving customers from two main regions, right? US East and US West, with security being paramount, plus compliance being paramount. A really hard challenge. They also didn't want to do this by increasing management costs as well as operational friction. Enter Cloud NGFW. Because Cloud NGFW is a SaaS service hosted in AWS and offered via AWS Marketplace, it made it a really easy decision to select. The net result, they got industry-leading protections with unparalleled simplicity, tightly integrated in AWS services and workflow, enabling them to easily leverage the service like AWS Transit Gateway, Firewall Manager, Fargate, ECS, EKS, and EC2, all with a managed firewall to reduce management costs and reduce operational friction. The customer told us this is exactly the solution they were looking for. So really exciting. And finally, we have our containerized firewall. The key here is getting visibility and control directly at the workload. And that's why we built CN series. Ultimately, Because the network connects all these apps, it's the network security team that has to deal with the large, complex networks of interconnected applications hosted on heterogeneous workloads in multiple public clouds and data centers. The key differentiator here are deep integrations, right? This is an NGFW that was built for Kubernetes. It's also the industry's first ML-powered NGFW built for Kubernetes. So you get that layer 7 visibility and control and protection for east-west traffic between pods in different trust zones. You gain layer 7 traffic visibility and context in the Kubernetes environments, protect containerized apps deployed anywhere with best-in-class security, and dynamically scale network security without compromising DevOps speed. We have a ton of integrations, including across Kubernetes container clusters and any virtual machine cloud environment, as in public, private, and hybrid. So let's talk about a customer example. This is a customer that wanted to host many apps on a single K8 cluster for efficiency. Some apps required PCI compliance. Layer 7 traffic inspection was required between PCI and non-PCI apps, and security needed to be K8 native, right? So they really needed a true Kubernetes solution here. The result, they deployed CN series on K8 clusters. They got a full NGFW functionality at the namespace and pod level, layer 7 firewall and threat prevention within Kubernetes clusters for PCI compliance, and security that auto scales with apps, ultimately resulting in significant increase in the traffic on the holidays that CN series could easily gain this visibility and control for them. The inspection between web server and database for PCI compliance, and secure specific application namespaces only with stricter policy and not all applications on just a single cluster. So truly giving them great visibility. So let's talk a little bit more now about the platform and the recognition that we see. So we deliver these outcomes in a single platform, our network security platform that we call Firewall as a platform. The solution provides consistent protection and experience where applications and users reside, on your network, in the cloud. We also deliver natively integrated capabilities resulting in simplified and highly effective networking and security. Customers just get the benefits we bring as the new capabilities fold out. And we're best in class. We enable network transformation while protecting against the most sophisticated attacks within the world's best cybersecurity company. So here we got some stats again from a Forrester Total Economic Impact report from last year. What we see here is a reduced total cost of security stack by eliminating point solutions and avoiding over provisioning, resulting in over $570K over 3 years of savings. Then we see 25% decrease in mean time to resolution, resulting in $240,000 saved over 3 years. Again, benefit of the impact for virtual deployments, we see 90% reduction in the time required to deploy firewalls, 20% decrease of data breach likelihood after 3 years. Again, these are pretty big numbers. And as I noted before, one of the largest, if not the largest, leading cybersecurity company in the world, we see over 95 of Fortune 100 companies relying on us, being number one in enterprise security with tens and tens of thousands of customers with a great customer satisfaction score. So I talked for a while. What can you get? What can you do? I encourage you, take an ultimate test drive where you get a chance to get your hands directly on this. In the bottom right, there's another example for the AWS market. If you're really into AWS cloud, we've got immersion days. We can get very hands-on in guided labs and see exactly how this works. Maybe you're a little bit more passive. You want to do a demo. Here we got a demo. And then maybe you're already done some of these things. Give VM series a try for 30 days for free. Just go ahead and give it a go. All these QR codes work. Go ahead and scan them. Get yourself hands-on with what we've got. And with that, I thank you for the time. And how about we jump into the Q&A?
Yeah, definitely. Let's get to some Q&A, Greg, because boy, do we have a lot. I don't know if you could see while you were presenting, but the chat box is just blowing up. So we're going to jump in, but before we get into that, I do want to point out that I have put a poll up for you all on the screen here. So obviously we just got a lot of really great information from Greg and Palo Alto. What additional information, what follow-up information would you like to get about the Palo Alto solution? And I do, I'm just going to keep hyping on this because I think it's really easy to forget, we just sort of like, no, I'm fine. But this is an opportunity for you to reach out directly to the Palo Alto team, hold out your hands and say, this is the information I want, put it in my hands. And then they will do that. So you don't have to go digging. You don't have to find this information. They're going to hand it right to you. So make your life easy. Click on that poll right now. Let them know how they can help you, how they can support you. And I think that's a great way to jump in. Speaking of jumping in, Greg, we have tons of questions. You ready to get going?
Yeah. So either that means I didn't answer enough of it in my content, or people are super thrilled.
Yes, it's either a great indicator or the opposite. But I think in this case, it's a lot of engagement. We've got a strong crew out there today. They're all hyped up. Well, I want to start with this one, and Christopher's had a couple of great questions with us already today. He's really wanting to know if you could dig in a little bit to what makes Palo Alto so unique. What makes you stand out?
Sure. So I want to say a little more than 16 years, Palo Alto Networks has been hyper-focused on network security, right? So sure, we have other offerings here, and this particular session is very focused on network security, but we live and breathe that. That's what we're here for. And the platform that I just went through brings in a ton of different capabilities. And truthfully, what that ultimately means is to have the same capabilities of what Palo Alto Networks is offering, you would need 7, 8, 9 other vendors giving you a single point solution. So getting a firewall, for example, plus intrusion detection, plus URL filtering, plus sandbox detection, right? And then we get into DLP, or remote user access, and then endpoint protection. All of these things you would typically have to go with another vendor for each one for. And we consolidate all that in one place. And then further, that's validated by third parties, right? So instead of just a marketing guy trying to tell you we're cool, right? We've got Gartner putting us at the top right of the Magic Quadrant for 10 years now. We've got the Forrester Wave top as well. And then we also have a total economic impact study from Forrester that highlights exactly what I was also talking through about the efficacy, and with 115% ROI paid back in 3 years, right? And then huge efficacy on reduction in time to deploy the firewalls, and massive decrease in the data breaches you'll see over 3 years. So again, what I'm highlighting here is ultimately that what separates us is we've been a leader, validated by third parties, and our customers are very happy with these products.
Well, that's what we're going for. Smiles on faces. I want to get to this question from Nathan here because he's wondering about managed. So he's asking, are these firewalls managed or self-managed? And if we do self-managed, is there a support portal or an easy way to communicate issues, changes needed? Especially because I think with a lot of folks out there, they might be asking themselves if they're doing self-managed, are they going to have to hire a bunch of people? What's the impact of that? So can you help us out there?
Sure. So what I talked through a little bit today was a number of different form factors of our firewall. And the CN series and VM series are offered today in a very self-managed model, right? So it's for you to tune and set up and do as you please for your security. And sure, we're always here to help you. We're your strategic partner here. What the direction you want to go for your firm that's the right security for you, we can help you design exactly what you need. We have a wonderful customer support side of the business, right? That's what we're known for. A really strong support there. Great customer sat scores. Also, we have those portals where you could find things in the community, find questions if you prefer not to maybe call somebody on the phone. But the other one I wanted to highlight is a little more of a managed item here, and that's the Cloud NGFW for AWS, right? So this is an AWS session, so it'd be key to highlight this exact product. We released that early this year, and it's supposed to be, it was designed for you to have the same firewall outcomes without having to fully manage a firewall. So I think if you're concerned with how many folks you have on the team, their expertise level, and maybe what you've already got on their workloads and how busy they are, that could be a really great option for you as well.
Boy, Greg, I was hoping that we were going to get through a few more questions, but we are really short on time today, so we're going to have to wrap it up, which is nuts because there's just still so many questions coming in. I also want to let you know you got a couple of high fives and thank yous from the audience as well. Before we let you take off, though, Greg, can you let us know if somebody is ready to get started, if they want to jump in? Is there a free trial, a lab? Is there something they should, get rolling with?
Absolutely. So if you go to the AWS Marketplace and you search Palo Alto Networks, you will see Cloud NGFW has a free trial there. You will also see the VM series has a free trial there, so you can get plugged in right there through the AWS Marketplace that I'd imagine many of you are already using. If you'd prefer maybe not to do a free trial, but you're looking for a hands-on lab, I can add a link here, and you can absolutely get into one of our upcoming AWS immersion days and get your hands right on these products, and we've got a number of these scheduled out through the year.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that sounds like a great place to start. Greg, I know we definitely did not hit all the questions. I want to let you and the audience know that we will make sure that you get all of the questions that were asked during the webinar so that you and the Palo Alto team can follow up. If you do have a little time, you're welcome to stick around on live chat as well, Greg. And thank you again for such an incredible presentation and discussion.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, and to all of you out there, thank you for asking some great questions and for taking the time to fill out that poll. That is, again, such a great way to let Palo Alto know what information you would like to get. I do also want to remind you to head on over to the Handouts tab, and you can actually check out the Palo Alto ebook, Bringing Zero Trust Security to the Public Cloud. Virtual firewalls play essential roles in multi-tiered defenses. It is really well laid out. It's got a lot of really engaging graphics. I know we were all talking earlier about how much we enjoy visual information displays, so go check out this handout. It's got lots of good stuff for you there. And while you're filling out that poll, I'm going to go ahead and give some more prizes away. It's that time of day. Let's do some prizes. So I'm going to remind you all one more time that you do need to be here present at the live webinar in order to qualify to win. And we're going to give away a $500 Amazon gift card up first. So that is going to go to Najah Mazood of Texas. Najah Mazood of Texas, you've won a $500 Amazon gift card. And our next two winners of an Apple Watch, these are the Series 7s, are going to 1, Jesse Medina of California, and 2, John Davis of Indiana. Jesse Medina of California and John Davis of Indiana. Congratulations, Najah, on your gift card, and to Jesse and John on your Apple Watches. As always, we'll get in touch with you about claiming your prize after the webinar. Don't forget that there are still lots more chances to win one of those prizes today, plus that best question gift card from each session. And again, it does not matter if we read your question out or not, you're still entered to win that best question prize. But for now, I'm going to take a deep breath. Sometimes my speaking is faster than my breathing. And I'm going to move us along in our presentation here because we have 3 awesome presenters to introduce to you. So I am absolutely thrilled to bring onto the stage here Brett Gessner, Senior Cloud Channel Sales Engineer at Gigamon, Faisal Paez, Senior Partner Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, and Jonathan Mahoney, Director of Cybersecurity at Presidio. Brett, Faisal, and Jonathan, thank you all for being here with us today and letting us sit in on a discussion. I know you guys are going to keep it a little more free-flowing and casual with the 3 of you. Very excited to be a fly on the wall for that. So Brett, I think you're up first. I'm going to hand the mic on over to you.
Thanks for all the attendees that joined today. We really appreciate the time. We just wanted to do a real quick 10 seconds on each of us, kind of our background. So I'll just start. My background is heavy in public cloud. That's kind of all I've been doing for the past 7 years, both in a pre-sales capacity and a post-sales capacity as well. And now I'm at Gigamon. So I'll pass it over to Faisal.
Sure. Hey, so my background is primarily on networking and network security. I've been with AWS for a little over 8 years, and most of this time I have been in customer-facing roles, helping customers architect solutions using the AWS networking and security services. Right now, I work primarily with our ISV partners on the networking and security segments to help develop joint solutions for our customers, and also find out innovative ways to solve the different complex problems that our customers present to us.
All right, perfect. And I'm Jonathan.
Awesome. Thank you, Faisal.
Security here at Presidio. I've been here going on 12 years now. So I've got a technical background, also GRC. So spend a lot of times now helping customers secure not only on-prem workloads, but a lot in the cloud workloads like AWS. So thanks everybody for coming.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. All right, let's jump into it, shall we? All right, so we've already gone through that. All right, so the agenda for today, right? And we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So, we're kind of going to be asking questions amongst ourselves. We don't want to PowerPoint you to death. I know how fun those presentations are. So first, we'll talk about security considerations and best practices in the cloud, specifically AWS. We'll do a quick Gigamon review, just a few seconds there, because I know the topic of today is securing workloads at AWS, but kind of how we play into that. And then we'll talk about how Presidio helps customers with AWS solutions. And then we'll wrap it up. So let's get started. All right, so those of us that have been in IT a while, this probably looks really familiar. I like to keep things really simple, so this is a crayon slide, right? Maybe some of y'all have seen this before, but this is what we face really in the network a lot of the times, right? We have so many different tools in different parts of the stack, right, that are, feeding traffic into different things, whether it's firewalls, whether it's APMs, whether it's SIEMs. But the problem that we see a lot of times within the network or within deployments is there's a lot of ad hoc deployment, and it's not necessarily bespoke to what the organization wants, right? A lot of times you have users configuring their own pieces of infrastructure. And what does that do? It creates disorganization, it creates complexity, and also creates, quite frankly, a lot of security vulnerabilities a lot of the times. Jonathan, I'm sure you probably see this every day in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time designing networks, designing on-prem networks, and exactly what you're talking about here, is even more so going to the cloud. So I could not agree more.
Yep. So we've probably all seen this, but it is important to cover, right? I still talk to customers to this day. I talk to thousands of customers over the past 7 years, and I still hear it. I'm in the cloud, so I'm secure. Couldn't be further from the truth, right? There's certain things that AWS are responsible for, basically their hardware and infrastructure, compute, storage, networking, database services. But it's up to the customer, right, or the users and consumers of cloud to secure those applications. Quite frankly, a lot of times when I talk to customers, we can talk about brute force attacks and SQL injection and, a lot of the different kind of vulnerabilities and attacks out there. But quite frankly, a lot of times I see vulnerabilities within identity and access management. So I was working with a telecommunications company that basically their policy was, okay, everyone gets an AWS subscription, right? And you have privileges across the board. You can do whatever you want. Well, that's kind of a problem, right? So that's just kind of one of the consistent themes I've seen over the years. But I think it is important to understand that, right? So Faisal, what do you see as the biggest security considerations and best practices for a customer looking to move to the cloud from the get-go?
Sure, Brett. So I just start by saying that AWS has been architected to be the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available today. Now, one security consideration that is very different from on-premises deployments is the concept of shared responsibility model, as you were mentioning earlier. Now, in a typical on-premises security model, customers are responsible for end-to-end security of their entire infrastructure. Now at AWS, we have a shared responsibility model where AWS manages and controls the components from the host operating system and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities in which the services operate. And AWS customers are responsible for building secure applications. So anything at the application level are a responsibility of the customer. Now, in this model, customers retain full control of the security they implement to protect their own content at AWS. Now, we do provide a wide variety of best practices, documents, encryption tools, and other guidance that our customers can leverage in delivering application-level security measures. Then we have a large network of partners who can help our customers secure their workloads in AWS, both during migrations and after migrations. Now, in addition to taking advantage of the native AWS security services and partner solutions that are available in AWS, our customers really appreciate how the AWS well-architected framework has evolved over the years and the security guidance it provides when a customer migrates the new workloads into the cloud. This framework is built on a set of best practices for operating workloads in AWS. So, for example, during a review cycle for your workload, you can double check if you have MFA properly enabled on your account, or if you are implementing the principles of least privilege, or how you're protecting your data both at rest and in transit. We have seen our customers adopting the well-architected framework and making it an integral checkpoint for any new workload they move into the cloud. So these are, at a high level, some of the security considerations I wanted to mention, and I'm sure we'll talk more as our discussion progresses.
Outstanding. And I think another thing to mention as well, Faisal was talking about partners that can help implement, those security best practices and quite frankly, remediation a lot of times as well. And I know Jonathan's going to get into that later, Presidio being one of those partners. I did want to highlight, though, we kind of jumped ahead to well-architected, but that was great, Faisal. But just kind of what I've seen over the years, and this isn't something published out there. This is kind of my own opinion. What does a successful cloud journey look like? And what I've noticed over the years is there's really three key phases, in my opinion, right? The first being the assessment phase, right? So understanding what's on premises today, understanding application interdependencies, understanding where you might have some limitations, where you might not be able to move a specific workload to cloud right away, doing POCs. That could include doing, test dev workloads, moving something that's not mission critical into the cloud. So that's really the assessment phase. And then the build phase, right? So now we're talking about actually moving infrastructure into cloud. I kind of don't like the word lift and shift, but there's a lot of that out there as well. So taking applications and just kind of lifting them into cloud, whether that's using VMs or even quite frankly using the cloud for DR, right? Pacification, that's another kind of buzzword I've heard out there these days. So taking an application and running it as a platform as a service. A good example of that is, take a SQL server and run it as an RDS instance in AWS, right? And also building out, building the foundation, right? So building out your VPCs, building out direct connect, building out firewalls, load balancers, IAM policies, things of that nature. And then the third phase is the optimization phase, right? So now we're talking about, okay, we're in cloud. How do we take advantage of automated deployments, whether that's using CloudFormation templates, maybe you're using Terraform, maybe you're using Ansible, things of that nature, right? I talk to so many customers, right? And they say, okay, I've moved to cloud and I'm spending too much money. And then you start kind of peeling back the onion a little bit and you realize, okay, well, you're not using automation technology. You're not even using things as simple as scaling groups, right? Also setting up monitoring and cost optimization as well. And the nice thing is, all three of us, whether it's Presidio, AWS, Gigamon, we play a role in all three of these phases. I know Jonathan's going to talk about kind of some of the customers they've worked with as well.
Yeah, and just one note on
any
this.
comments, Jonathan?
Yeah, from your build and optimize phase, this is where I usually questions like, what security controls do we need in place? Faisal mentioned the shared security, the shared responsibility model earlier. I think what we're seeing is when we're taking on-prem data or applications to the cloud, it gets very confusing quickly. Sometimes customers are like, well, what do I need here? What do I need? And it's like when we're talking to customers, it's like we need to look at the classification and the risk level of the data information in there. And if you've got a set of controls or a standard of controls on-prem, you need to actually have that in the cloud as well. So making sure you have the right firewalls in place, you have identity and access management, you have all those other pieces to maintain a consistent security posture there. And I think the other one where we've seen huge strides, especially with things like with AWS specifically, is in monitoring. Like once these applications are up, can we monitor the traffic? Can we monitor behavior? And that was really hard to do in the cloud 4 or 5 years ago. But now in AWS, that's a crucial part of it, is like we can look at what the traffic is. We can identify threats, we can identify anomalies. So looking at having the right controls up front, and then from a monitoring standpoint, continuously watching for that stuff as well.
Absolutely, yep. All right, so we went through well architected. All right, so just a really quick commercial on Gigamon and what we do. So Gigamon, we're absolutely about network visibility, right? So we can take packets from anywhere, right? Whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on premises, and we can send them to appropriate tooling, whether that tooling's in the cloud or on-prem. So SIM tools, APMs, firewalls, right? We're able to aggregate that traffic and send it accordingly. I'm sure there's quite a few of you that are attending today. I'm sure you're familiar with us. But really this slide, it's kind of complicated, but I'll go through it quickly. I mean, from the bottom up, right? So we have our both physical and cloud virtual appliances that are able to be deployed. Our GigaView OS is kind of the engine or the brain that powers, right? These devices, right? So with OS, you're doing things like flow mapping and filtering, load balancing, fabric mapping, things of that nature. And then you go to kind of the next level, right? And now we start getting into, being able to take those packets and using things like dedupe, TLS decryption, packet flow and slicing. So again, think of us as kind of that central hub to take that traffic and send it accordingly, right? And then GigaView FM, which is Fabric Manager, is our management and orchestration engine. It's basically the GUI where you control all of these different features and functionalities, right? And then the last thing I'll just say is Threat Insights. So that's our network threat detection and response solution, which is a pretty slick solution. We could spend all day talking about it. But basically what we're doing is we're enabling your respective SOCs, right, with threat mitigation. So really awesome tool there. All right, cloud security with AWS. All right, Faisal, do you want to cover these native tools?
Sure. So as you can see, so at AWS, we do try to group our security services by a specific segment described in the AWS well-architected framework for security. So these areas are like identity access management, detection, infrastructure protection, data protection, incident response, and compliance and governance. And what you see, each of these services are built to solve a specific customer use case. So for example, AWS Security Hub, which is a cloud security posture management solution, it provides you an overall visibility into your infrastructure and the resources running in the cloud, not only in one account, but across your AWS organizations. Then you have Amazon Guard Duty, which is a threat detection solution that continuously looks for signs by integrating with other security solutions and generate alerts, and also provides you options to automatically remediate some of these findings. Like under the hood, you will see these services integrate with other AWS services, like the different sources of the logs, like VPC flow logs, which captures network level traffic information, or CloudTrail, which collects audit data based on what each of your users are doing in their AWS accounts. So we won't go over all these services individually, but I highly encourage you to take a look at the AWS security homepage and see which of these native services make sense for your specific use case. One thing I wanted to point out here is AWS's core infrastructure it is built to satisfy the security requirements for the military, global banks, and other highly sensitive organizations. This is backed by a deep set of cloud security tools with more than 230 security, compliance, and governance services and key features. So the services that we are highlighting here on the screen, like for under each of these services, we have many key security features that you will see might help solve a particular security use case that you may have. And in addition to this, AWS also supports about 98 security standards and compliance certifications. So if you have a workload where you have a specific compliance requirement, chances are AWS already provides you the services by using which you can meet those certification requirements. And these certifications help satisfy compliance requirements for virtually every regulatory agency around the globe. Just to I'll just repeat something I mentioned earlier. Like AWS has the largest and most dynamic community of partners. So AWS partners offer hundreds of tools and features that help customers meet their security objectives. So if you need help with your security implementation in AWS, I would highly encourage reach out to your partners, and see how the partners can help share the knowledge that they have gained by working with other customers implementing security controls for their AWS accounts. Okay, back to you, Brett.
No, that's outstanding. Thanks, Fazil. And I'll also mention too, Google search, if you do AWS Reference Architecture Center, there's a great reference architecture center where you can look at, there's dozens of reference architectures as well as a lot of information on the well-architected framework. And Jonathan, I know you're going to go through, how your team implements a lot of these tool sets as well for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And something Faisal said really resonates because for a long time, security was the group who didn't want to go to the cloud because the cloud was insecure. Like, I completely disagree with that. We actually started, a number of years ago, moving customers to AWS for security to leverage GovCloud, to leverage other compliance controls. So often customers are going like, hey, I need to keep my most sensitive data on-prem. In a lot of cases, we took the most sensitive data from on-prem to AWS to be more secure. Like, as you said, most customers do not have all the security certifications that AWS has. Just by the nature of it, the public cloud shouldn't be seen as less secure. Often it's more secure. So security shouldn't be a reason not to go to the cloud. It's actually one of our main drivers.
Thanks, Jonathan. And then here's just an example of AWS solution architecture, right? So there's a new feature out called Gateway Load Balancer Endpoint, right? So traditionally, when you were using VPC traffic mirroring, right, you would have different VPCs. You're sending the traffic from those VPCs to different shared services hubs, for example. Now with Gateway Load Balancer, you're able to take traffic from multiple VPCs, multiple subscriptions either, to a central point, right? Gigamon was actually one of the first to integrate with Gateway Load Balancer, so you can see that in the architecture diagram here. It's going to our V-Series, which is the engine that lives in the cloud. And you can see Fabric Manager, which is the orchestrator for all of that. Faisal, would you agree that's a good summation of Gateway Load Balancer?
Yeah, and I can add to that. I think it would also help giving a little insight into what the VPC traffic mirroring does. And for those of you who are already using the Gigamon solution with VPC traffic mirroring, might know this. It captures the networking packets from each endpoint running within a VPC and mirrors that to a particular destination. So in this case, we are showing an example of Gigamon solutions. Receiving those live mirror traffic and then doing further analysis to give you security insights. Now, previously, before we had a Gateway Load Balancer integration, whenever customers wanted to do centralized monitoring of their live traffic mirroring traffic, This was possible using cross-account sharing, but that model could lead into routing complexity depending on customers' existing overall network. Now, gateway load balancer actually solved that. By using gateway load balancers, customer can easily centralize their traffic monitoring appliances, and mirror traffic can be forwarded from any subnet, VPC, or account to a highly scalable and operationally efficient manner. And this happens via the gateway load balancer endpoints that are deployed in customer subnets containing their workloads. If this new model of doing VPC traffic mirroring is interesting to you, definitely take a look at the blog that Brett referenced here. It does also discuss some of the common architecture patterns that you can actually solve by using gateway load balancer and VPC traffic mirroring together.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I'm going to kick it over to Jonathan. He's going to talk through Presidio's AWS solutions and some use cases and how they've helped customers here.
Absolutely. Thanks for passing over. So when people look at Presidio, a lot of people know us as a reseller of hardware and other things here. What a lot of people don't know is we're one of the actually largest AWS partners out there. So when you look at when we're talking to customers, and I'm out talking to customers, it's about three things. It's about cloud and applications, it's around security, and it's around operations and monitoring. So really all three of the things we're talking about today. And really what we're doing is when we're talking to customers now is taking a look at what workloads they have, what workloads make sense to move to a cloud in a cloud right strategy, but helping them understand how they're going to move forward in that case. And for some customers I mentioned earlier, we want to move them to the cloud for security reasons. So we have an example. I had a defense contractor last year where they had to meet CMMC compliance. So that basically means the customer had to meet about 170 different controls for any system that held Department of Defense data. So when the customer came to us and said, hey, how can we go secure this? Our first answer was go into AWS for this data, leverage the AWS controls and the compliance requirements. And now from a security perspective, you're not responsible for all that stuff down. You're responsible for the application and the data up, which is a lot smaller subset. So instead of having to re-architect parts of the network, put in secure enclaves, put in firewalls, to put in monitoring for just those enclaves, we could leverage AWS and the AWS monitoring capabilities to do that. So instead of spending 6 months building that environment internally, we took a look at the application, built an IaaS environment in AWS to meet those compliance requirements, and then help the customer actually start to go through the CMMC compliance requirements pieces there. So that's one of the big areas we have is can we take sensitive applications, sensitive data, remove them from your on-prem environment and move them to the cloud? And a lot of people, I think it's a very overused term, use the term zero trust. Trying to do zero trust on an on-prem network and start to do isolation is pretty difficult to do, especially if you've got a network and applications that have been flat for the last 10, 15, 20 years. We can enable zero trust quickly for the most sensitive assets by putting them in an AWS environment and having that environment isolated from the main network. It's way easier than trying to reverse engineer what was going on. So that's, looking at zero trust, looking at how we secure applications in the cloud is a big part of it. What a lot of people don't realize too is from a Presidio standpoint, not only doing security, but networking and data center and all those pieces. But we made a huge investment in our application team too. So we've got over 400 developers and public cloud resources who are focused on helping customers take their workloads from on-prem, move them into an IaaS environment, move them into a PaaS environment, secure those environments, and then monitor those things 24/7, 365. It's a huge tenet. When you're having any conversation at this point, it's much less about networking and data center and on-prem security versus business transformation, workload transformation, and securing that stuff going forward.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I already kind of touched on the why Presidio piece. As I mentioned, we are one of the largest AWS partners out there. We hold a ton of certifications here. And important in my business as well is leveraging AWS as a buying mechanism. What we also see with customers is when they're going to procure security tools and security subscriptions and looking at marketplace is can we leverage things like their EDP and their spend with AWS to better leverage that. So we have a large number of customers who have guaranteed spend with AWS over the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the things we're seeing more and more as they build these environments out, as they build this out, buying the tooling through AWS in order to burn down some of that EDP leverage better pricing as well. So when we look at it from a cloud perspective, it's really two main areas for us. It's around helping customers migrate those applications, those clouds, secure them, and then also leveraging the AWS marketplace to implement the controls for the environment all in one spot. There's a ton of advantage of it from a purchasing standpoint, EDP burn down standpoint, also getting a central view of all your software and subscriptions all in one place. But we're seeing this more and more with customers as one of their main buying mechanisms is directly with us and AWS together.
Yep, it's key. Yeah, I mean, that you couldn't have said it better. I mean, having almost your own curated AWS marketplace, I mean, Gigamon were to be a CPPO program as well. So, yeah, that was great. Thank you, Jonathan. And that is really all the content that we had today. We really appreciate everybody jumping on.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe we just lost the end of Brett saying goodbye there, but I believe he was saying thank you and he appreciates you all jumping on. Well, thank you so much to Brett, to Jonathan, to Faisal for that awesome discussion. Sometimes it's fun to just listen to some experts kind of toss ideas around and like I said, be a fly on the wall. So really appreciate that. You can see that I've got that poll question up for you all. We would love to get your feedback on any additional resources, information that you would like to get from Gigamon. This feedback is so valuable. It lets them know, what kind of follow-up that you want, but also, what resonated with you, what is helpful to you, and that's really, really valuable. Besides which, just, hey, as I've said, making your life a lot easier. So don't waste any time Googling. Let them hand you the information and let them know what information you would like to get. And I'm going to leave that up for a minute longer because I'm going to give away some prizes. Okay, so prizes. I'm going to remind you all that you do need to be present here at the live webinar in order to win. Let's do a $500 gift card to start. So this is a $500 Amazon gift card going to Courtney Hardy of Ohio. Courtney Hardy of Ohio, you have won a $500 Amazon gift card. And now I've got an Apple Watch Series 7. I'm going to give this away to Christian Kimball. Christian Kimball of Washington, you have won a Apple Watch Series 7. So congrats to both Courtney and to Christian for their gift card and your Apple Watch. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. I'm going to remind you that we've still got one more session, which means there is one more time to win after that, plus a best question card that's up for grabs. So keep getting those questions in. I saw some great questions coming in, so keep that coming. All right, well, folks, I got to say, I don't know how this happens. Every time, I'm always surprised. We're rolling, we're having so much fun, and all of a sudden, here we are at the end. But the good news is the fun is not over. We are definitely going out on a bang today. We've got a very exciting presentation coming from Snyk. So this is Anthony Cito here. He's a Snyk field strategist. I have to say, I always find the Snyk presentation so interesting. This will be no exception. Anthony, without any further ado, I'm going to hand the platform on over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
We gotcha.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. So good morning, good evening, good night, depending on where you're joining from. My name is Anthony Cito, and I am a field strategist at Snyk. And today we're going to talk about developer-focused security from code to cloud and back. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Snyk, I'll spend just a minute or two giving you the overview of who we are. So Snyk, we have been around since 2015, and our value is really focused on developer-first security, right? So we're all about how do we build security earlier in the development lifecycle so that customers like yourself can find these problems in your applications, in your modern development before you actually get into production. And so we started off helping customers secure open source. So Snyk Open Source was our first product, and it was really focused on as more customers use open source libraries in their code base, how do we make sure that we're securing and picking the right open source libraries? And from there, we've expanded our portfolio to include Snyk Code, which is focused on first-party code, so the code that you write. We also have Snyk Container, which is focused on how do we build more secure containers before we get to production. And then we have Snyk Infrastructure as code, which is focused on how do we scan your Terraform, your infrastructure as code, your CloudFormation, et cetera. So again, you can make sure that before you deploy to the cloud, you've got secure configurations. And then the basis for the majority of the call today is going to be on Snyk Cloud. So this is our newest offering, and we'll talk a bit about more about what we're doing in that space here in just a few minutes. So just a couple of key things about Snyk. So again, we are developer first, so it's all about empowering your developers to really own security. And while we are a developer-first security company, we certainly have a deep security root as well, right? So we have a best-in-class open source vulnerability database that it kind of sits behind all of our offerings, and that database is actually being used by other vendors as well. So you've got vendors like Trend Micro and Rapid7 and Tenable that leverage our vulnerability database as part of their platform. Snyk is also a CVE numbering authority, so we actually have research teams that can publicly disclose vulnerabilities. So we're not just a tooling company, we actually have security really as part of our core competency as well. So let's talk about cloud, right? And let's talk about how cloud has changed the way we really deal with security on applications. So if we go back just 5, 6, 7 years, people were very focused on their data center, right? And in that data center world, which is soon becoming a bit of a legacy, applications were built in a very different way, right? Applications were really just built by developers, and everything else related to running that application was done by a different team. So in this kind of legacy data center world, IT was really the number one lead singer of the band, if you will, right? Everything was all about IT services, and ultimately developers just wrote applications. But as we've moved to the cloud, things have changed, right? Now developers have much more say in the way that things are being developed and the way things are being deployed, right? Developers are now not just writing first-party code, but they're leveraging open source code. They're designing containers. They're leveraging infrastructure as code, right? So they really could potentially own the full life cycle of an application, which is very different, right? So in this world, applications really are first-class citizens. And what we've seen here is a drastic change in the way that we address security. And so if you look at the market today, there's a lot of security vendors out there that do cloud security, right? And certainly, there's no shortage of those folks who do all sorts of security related to the cloud. The challenge is that many of them take a bit of a legacy approach in the sense that they want to look at your deployed environment first, basically run a scan or an audit, and then tell you what's wrong, right? And for Snyk, this is not the way that we envision security going forward, right? If you think about the way that we build our clouds today, so much of it is defined using infrastructure as code, right? So why can't we take the same approach to security that we're taking with our application development, right? Why can't we scan this code early and often and be able to find these things before we deploy? And so the other challenge that we see in the security space is this ratio here of 100 to 1, right? Where essentially what we're seeing is that the number of developers far outweighs the number of security analysts or security members in an organization, right? And the numbers that we've seen that have pretty much been industry adopted is 100 to 1. And so the challenge becomes, how do we scale our security teams to meet the ever changing load and demand for all these new apps that developers are creating? And so what we end up with is a DevOps cycle that's a bit broken, right? You've got cloud security teams that are undermanned or understaffed, and they're tired of tools that telling them they just have bad news, right? These tools that exist today are great, but they don't really give you the information you need to fix the problem. They tell you what's wrong, and then typically customers open up a ticket, throw it over the fence, and it's up to a developer or an engineer to figure out, well, what do I do, right? And so this doesn't really help you get ahead of things. And again, it's a very reactive approach to security. Now, on the other side of the equation, you have developers, and developers are in that same boat. They're tired of getting alerts or JIRA tickets that tell them that they have problems, but without any way to fix these issues. On top of that, they're also using different tools, right? So there are cloud security tools that are designed for security teams, and then there are tools designed for developers. And what we find is that these tools don't always talk to each other. They don't speak the same language. They don't use the same rules. And so ultimately what you end up with is conflicting results. And for the developers, you end up with low adoption, right? Developers don't want to use security tools. They want to use tools that are designed for them. And so what Snyk did is about 6 months ago, we went out and we bought a company called Fugue. And Fugue was a vendor in the cloud security posture management space. And what we liked about Fugue is that they brought a very developer-first approach, which was, again, very similar to the way that Snyk does things, to cloud security. And so what we want to do is we want to empower our customers to really build security early on. And what that means is we want to make sure that developers are finding issues in development. So while your teams are writing their CloudFormation or their Terraform code, being able to scan that code, understand what misconfigurations exist, but also allow security to put guardrails or pipelines or compliance policies in place to make sure that we're coding things to the standards that are necessary for our business before we get to production. Now, once we get to production, right, we still want to make sure that we have the ability to understand things that have changed, right? Because if we have drift in our deployed environment, we want to understand what that drift is so that we can go back to the engineers, back to the developers to make sure that they also understand what things they need to update on their end so that we always have a good state of what our deployed environment should look like based on our Terraform or infrastructure as code. So what we're bringing to market and what we announced at AWS Reinforce is Snyk Cloud. So this is something that is currently in a closed beta, but we will see this going to market here in the next 2 months or so. And Snyk Cloud is really based on 3 core pillars. So the first of which is securing in code. And this is a lot of what you can do today with Snyk. We're just going to add a little bit of secret sauce to it. And so what this means is we want to, again, be able to scan your Terraform, your infrastructure as code, and make sure that we can find these problems early on. So what that means is we can be in the developer's IE. So while your developers are writing their code, we can scan it and let them know what misconfigurations exist. But we can also integrate into the SCMs, right? So if you have your GitHubs and your Git repos of the world, we can integrate and scan your code that's living in repo. We can scan in the pipeline. We also have first-party integration with Terraform Cloud as well, right? So again, this is all about how do we scan early and often before we deploy into production. Now, the other thing that we're bringing to market is something called the Unified Policy Engine. And this is something that we believe is fairly unique to us and will certainly be a differentiator. And what this means is that we're going to have the same rule set, the same engine that's going to scan our code both pre and post deployment, right? So we want to make sure that the tools that we're using to scan post deployment have the same rules and policies that we scan pre-deployment. And so I'll give you an example. I spoke to a customer several weeks ago that told me that they use an open source tool for scanning their infrastructure as code. But when they have to get into production, they use AWS config to scan for things like HIPAA compliance. And so the challenge is they don't know if they're compliant until after they deploy because they have no way of writing controls related to infrastructure as code into their pre-deployment tools. And so what they end up with is they end up with 2 different tools doing 2 different sets of checks. And ultimately, the problem still becomes they can't scan and know if they're compliant until they actually are in production. And so this is very much a challenge for them that we are looking to help a lot of our customers solve. By having that same rule set, you can either use the same rules that are out of the box from Snyk, which will cover a variety of different compliance frameworks, or you can write your own custom rules. But the great thing is you only have to write them once. And so security can set a policy on what is acceptable, and we can enforce that both pre and post deployment. And I think that is really going to be a game changer for our customers. The last thing we're going to do is we're also going to do prioritization based on cloud context, right? So we understand that there's always going to be misconfigurations. There's always going to be things you need to fix. But ultimately, we need to prioritize when do we fix them, right? If I'm bringing up a problem to a security team or to an engineer or to a developer, they need to know, do you want me to fix this now? Or do you need me to fix this later? Because they need to prioritize how they're going to address these specific problems. And so we want to look at the way your cloud is deployed, understand the context of that so that we can help with that prioritization to eliminate some of that noise and to really help you accelerate that remediation process. So this is just a kind of a quick example here, just kind of talking through why this context matters, right? So this is a piece of Terraform code. And in this Terraform code, this developer has declared a public ACL, which basically means for this S3 bucket, this is a publicly readable and writable bucket. Now, the question is this a problem? Now, any IAC tool, including our own, that's going to scan this Terraform code is going to tell you this is probably bad practice and you should do something about it. But ultimately, we need to understand, do I need to fix it now or do I need to fix it later? And so if we take the first scenario here, right, we know that we've got this piece of code with this public ACL, right, this readable and writable S3 bucket. But we also know, based on the way your cloud is configured and deployed, that this S3 bucket is accessible from the internet. So in this case, we believe that you should escalate this issue. This should probably be raised to a critical finding and something that should be fixed immediately, because not only is this thing publicly readable and writable, but it's open to the world, right? So this is where that context really matters. This is also where we want to make sure that we can get this data back to the developers, right? So you can fix this issue fairly simply by just going into the AWS console and removing access for that S3 bucket to the internet. But now what you have is you have drift, right? Now you have a configured state in your deployed environment that doesn't match your pre-deployment state. And we believe that your infrastructure as code, whether it's CloudFormation, Terraform, Azure ARM, right? As we want to make sure that that is ultimately the source of truth. So we want to do our best to make sure that whatever changes we make in production get back to developers so that they can update that code so that we don't risk having the same vulnerability again when we redeploy. Now, on the other side, we've got another scenario, right? We've got the same piece of Terraform code, but now somebody has gone into the AWS console and set up a policy that says, I want to ignore all public ACLs. And so now what you have is a conflict between different tools, right? This is where the unified policy engine makes a lot of sense, because if I'm scanning my deployed environment with a cloud security tool, it's going to look at this public ACL statement and basically tell us that everything is okay, right? Because no matter what my developer coded, we're always going to ignore that ACL statement, right? But if I'm a developer and I'm using an infrastructure as code scanning tool, it's going to tell me that my things are misconfigured. So now I've got a security team using a tool that says that we're okay. I've got a developer using a developer tool that's telling them that this is a problem, right? And again, this is where that policy engine aims to really reduce some of that noise. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you a sneak peek, right, pun intended, of what Sneak Cloud looks like. So I will preface this by saying this is, in the middle of a closed beta, so we don't have a ton of functionality yet, but I want to give everyone just kind of a sneak peek of kind of where we're going and the vision that we want to paint. So if you'll give me 1 second here, I'm going to share my desktop, and then I'm going to ask Jessica to confirm that she can see that here in just a second.
I'm with you, Anthony.
1 second here. Okay, so
Yeah.
hopefully you are seeing my desktop.
We got a big black screen. Yep, there we go. We're with you. We're live.
Okay.
We're on.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so what you're looking at today that's in the center of the screen here is a IDE. It's IntelliJ. It's just a developer's IDE that they use to do coding in, right? So a lot of what we're going to talk about here in the next minute or so is what we actually can deliver today, right? So Sneak has a product called Infrastructure as Code. And again, we can scan your Terraform files, your CloudFormation, et cetera, to give developers feedback on misconfigurations before they deploy. So in this example, we are as far left as you can be, right? We're in the developer's IDE as they're writing their code, and I've got this Terraform file. And in this Terraform file, I've scanned it with Sneak, and Sneak is showing me that at line 23, there is a high severity issue, right? It says this block public policy control is disabled. It's tied to Sneak rule number 96. We give a description, an impact, we give a remediation as well. And so what we're seeing here is the ability to give developers that feedback while they're coding on possible misconfigurations. Now today, right, we have a list of checks and rules that we check around best practices for things like CIS and AWS best practices, et cetera. And so what you see here is we've got this issue that's defined as a high severity issue. Now today, this is very much based on the criticality or the severity ratings that we deliver at Sneak. When we add Sneak Cloud to the mix and we bring in that unified policy engine, that's going to change the results our developers see, because maybe in your organization, based on a policy, this is not an issue, in which case we would not show a developer anything here, right? Because there's no need in showing them things they need to fix if they don't actually apply based on, again, the compliance frameworks you need to adhere to, or maybe any custom policies you built. So, this is really covering more of the code to cloud side of things, right? Again, we're showing you the scan that we can do in the IDE. We can also do this in Git. We can do it in the CLI. We can do this in the CI pipelines as well. But really what we want to do is just show you that today we can help you kind of secure your code before you go to the cloud. But now once you get to the cloud, we want to be able to also go backwards, right? We want to be able to understand in our deployed environment what things have changed or what things are not meeting the specific compliances or rules. And so what you're looking at now, let me just flip my tab here. This is a preview again of Sneak. Now this is the new UI. So if you're an existing Sneak customer today, you get a little bit of a sneak peek of what the new UI will look like here in the short term. But essentially what we have is we have this tab here for cloud. And so now what we're doing is we're scanning a deployed cloud environment. Now it can be AWS, it could be multi-cloud, so it's not just one single cloud provider. And we'll show you all the different rules that are being violated in our deployed cloud. So you can see here, I've got my rules. I can expand this and I can show the different resources that are violating these rules. I can also group by resource. So if I wanted to flip the picture a little bit and look at the resource and say, show me all the rules that this resource is violating, we can do that as well. We're also going to have a variety of different filters, so we can search for things based on a variety of things like tags, rule ID, severities, etc. But ultimately, I'm going to go back to this rule view here, and you'll see here we've got the same high severity rule that has been violated, right? We've got this S3 bucket, doesn't have a block public policy enabled. It's Sneak rule 96, right? So the first thing to keep in mind here is that, again, it's the same engine. It's the same rule set that is scanning my cloud post-deployment that also scans my cloud pre-deployment. So in this case, I can open up this rule set and I can look at all my different resources, and I'm going to go down to this one right here, and I'm going to click on it. and I'll start to get some information. I can see the name, the type, the location, why it failed the rule, how to fix it. I also can click on the resource tab and I'll see some of the technical resource information as well. So this really gives my security teams a bit more of a detailed view on the specific resources that are blocking the cloud. So what we're looking to bring to market that's going to be very much what we consider to be a big differentiator for us is there's going to be a button here. I'm not sure where our team's going to put it yet, but it will be coming in the first quarter of next year. There's going to be a button here that I'm going to be able to click, and it's going to bring me back into Snyk, and it's going to bring me directly to the Terraform file that's in my repo, and it's going to bring me all the way down to the specific rule. So here's that rule 96 again. Again, we show the developer or the security user what the issue is, what the impact is, how do you resolve it, and then I can click on full details, and I can actually see the line of code my developer needs to fix. And so if you think about the workflow that we're bringing, right, we're not just going to be another bad news tool that tells you that things are broken, right? We're going to actually be able to show you, here is the things that are misconfigured. Here are the resources that you need to go look at. Here is the actual Terraform or infrastructure as code file that your developer needs to fix to bring you back to compliance. And, oh, by the way, here is the fix as well, right? So this is really, again, just a quick sneak peek of what we're doing, but this is really where we're going with Snyk Cloud to really bring that developer-first experience to the cloud security posture management space. So with that, I'm going to stop my sharing and jump back to the slides here, and we're going to walk through just a few more things here. Jessica, how are we doing on time here?
Yeah, you're right back on, and we've got, let's say like 7 minutes left, and then we should stop for some Q&A. I want to make sure we get to some of these questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I will do my best to get through this. So the other scenario I wanted to look at with Snyk is really around just an example with Log4Shell, right? Log4Shell was everybody's probably least favorite word from December. And while it was a while ago, it's a great example of why developer-first security really matters and why tools like Snyk are really effective in helping you resolve issues, right? So when you think about fixing Log4Shell, what information does a developer need to fix it, right? And so there are plenty of tools, again, that will look at your running cloud environment and tell you that you have Log4Shell or that it's been detected in your environment. And these tools will tell you things like what's the cluster name, what's the container name, what's the service, what's the CVE that it's fixed in. But ultimately, this isn't enough data, right? Telling me what CVE it's fixed in isn't necessarily sufficient to resolve the problem. Again, tools can tell me, that we have this issue running, but ultimately, I need to understand as a developer, is this an issue in our code? Is it an issue in our container? Or is it both? And so what we also found is that 60% of Log4Shell dependencies that were detected were what we call indirect dependencies, meaning they weren't necessarily in the packages that my developers were referencing, but they were in the packages that those open source libraries were pulling from. So in other words, if I'm using code from Bob and Bob is using code from Mary and Mary's using code from Jessica, and Jessica's code is the one that has Log4Shell, we need to fix that. We don't just need to fix Bob's code. We need to also understand if Jessica's code is vulnerable as well. And so this is where being able to go much deeper and looking at those transitive or those indirect dependencies when it comes to open source libraries really helps round out the picture of how we solve our problems. And so, again, you can leverage any open source or any runtime tool to understand if you have this running in your environment. But ultimately, you need Snyk to help you understand, is this something that is in my open source code, my container, or both? And so in this case, we've got a partnership with Sysdig, for example, and so Sysdig can maybe detect that you've got something running in production, but ultimately, again, we still have to fix the issue. So what I'm going to do now is run through another demo. Now, this demo is actually a recorded demo because I don't have this environment, so I'm going to switch to my screen again, and I'm going to hit play and kind of talk us through here, and then we'll round out the conversation. So hopefully you're seeing my screen. We'll get things going here. This is just a simple Java application that we know is susceptible to Log4Shell. And so we're inserting some bad code into the search bar that's going to exploit the Log4Shell vulnerability. And you can see here we've modified this application. And so now we know that we have some type of issue, right? And so now if we look at something like Sysdig, right, again, a partner of ours, they can tell you, hey, do I have this running in my environment, right? Scan my running environment. Tell me if this specific issue exists. And so what we'll see here in just a second is that Sysdig is going to detect that Log4Shell is present, which is great, right? You want to know that you've got something running in your real-time environment, but ultimately we've got to go back and fix the issue. So while they help you triage and potentially stop the bleeding, you still have to fix the wound. So that's where Snyk comes in, right? So now we're in the Snyk UI, and so Snyk has the ability to look at the container, And so this is a view of the vulnerabilities within a container. And you can see here that we've got 132 different issues. But thanks to our integration with Sysdig, we can click this executed button. And this executed button is going to help us filter out the things that are actually executed at runtime. So we can further prioritize what we need to fix based on the data we get from a runtime tool like Sysdig. And so here you can see we've got, log4j, log4shell running, and we can identify, what version it was introduced in and what the fix is. And ultimately, from the Snyk perspective, we can help you figure out pretty quickly, how do I remediate this by either fixing this issue here or potentially picking a better base image, right? So this is the way that we look at the container side of the world. But we can also scan your Git repos as well, right? So by looking at your Git repos, and the mouse will catch up with me here in just a second, by scanning your Git repos, we can actually look at a variety of things. We can identify a Docker file to scan. We can identify YAML for Kubernetes, or in this case, a pom.xml, right? But this is a Java Maven application, and this pom.xml is our manifest file. This tells us here are all the open source libraries that are being used, and these are all the different vulnerabilities. So again, we have log4shell that's also in my application itself. Now, the nice thing about Snyk is we're not just going to tell you have a problem, we can also fix the issue. So in this case, we can actually open a fix pull request, right? So we can identify the things we want to fix, and we will integrate directly into Git repos like GitHub, for example, and generate a pull request so that we can fix these issues for your developers without them ever having to lift a finger. So what you'll see here in just a second is we're going to end up in GitHub, and what we're going to do is we're going to show the developer a bit of information about the things that we want to fix, and then ultimately they can decide if they want to commit that pull request or not. And so you see here, we're telling them what we're going to fix here. We've got two issues, right, related to log4shell. We know there's an upgrade path that we need to go. We have to go from a 2.7 to a 2.12.2 package to get rid of this vulnerability. Now, before we make any of these changes, we're also going to make sure that we scan the code to make sure that nothing that we're going to bring in from a fix perspective is going to introduce another vulnerability, right? Because if you fix one thing and break another, that's not really good form either. And so in this case, we have no issues. We've passed our security check. And so ultimately what we'll see here in just a second is what Snyk is doing is it's going to go into the manifest file, and it's actually going to make the code change for our developer, right? So if we scroll down, we can see here, and I'm going to pause it, is that we are going from 2.7 to 2.12.2. Now, this is a one-line example for one specific vulnerability, but when you think about having potentially tens or hundreds of vulnerabilities, instead of your developers having to go back in and fix this code one at a time, we can make all the changes to the necessary upgraded packages, submit that pull request, they can commit the code, and all those changes are automatically done for them. So with that, I'm going to go back to my slides here, and we're going to round things out, right? So ultimately, what we see when customers adopt tools like Snyk is we really are giving them that ability to go faster, right? To develop code, to be more secure, and to really allow ourselves to move at a much faster speed by being proactive with our security as opposed to being reactive. Now, just kind of rounding things out, if you are interested in Snyk, certainly you can come to our website, but you can also go to the AWS Marketplace as well. So if you've got specific AWS spend allocated, you can procure directly on the AWS Marketplace. And with that, I want to thank you guys for joining us today, and certainly, hopefully we've got some time left here, Jessica, to answer any questions.
Yeah, we got a little bit of time left. We're going to sneak in a few questions. Thank you so much, Anthony, for that presentation. That was so great. We covered a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed your sneak peek. That's really great. Well, should we jump in and get a few questions in while we can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things I want to ask you is we had a question out there, somebody feeling a little bit overwhelmed by choice. Because there's a lot of options here. So what do you recommend for somebody that's just kind of getting started and evaluating these AWS options? What is the thing they should be asking vendors or looking for from vendors?
Oh, that's a great question. Not specifically a Snyk question, right? I mean, ultimately, I think anyone getting into security needs to figure out, what is the culture that you want to drive in your organization, right? Do you want to be more proactive and really build things early? If so, then you should be looking at tools that really address developers, right? I think that's the big shift that we're seeing is that, these companies that are very forward thinking are realizing that we can't do it all with the security team. We have to empower our developers. And so if your organization is really focused on trying to get ahead of the curve, if you do a lot of modern application development, if you're adopting the cloud, then certainly start looking at tools that really are focused on developers. I think that is the one kind of demographic that for many years has been overlooked. And now more organizations are depending on developers to really own security as part of their build process. And so very much, if you look at just vendors in general in the security space, more and more are starting to shift left. They're starting to want to appeal more to developers because I think everyone realizes we can't be reactive about security, especially in the dynamic nature of the cloud, where things are much, much faster and they change much quicker than your kind of traditional data centers where things are relatively static or stale.
I think that's actually a great answer. I think you gave them a lot of good information there. I do want to make sure we ask this from Eddie here to make sure that we get an answer. Is Sneak Cloud going to work for on-prem as well?
So today it will not. It's really focused on the three major cloud providers. So AWS, let me rephrase that. So if the question is there an on-prem version of Sneak? The answer is there is a single tenant SaaS version of Sneak that you can run in your own instance in AWS, but we don't have everything that runs on-prem in your data center, nor will it do configuration of your on-prem data center. It will be looking at cloud configuration as related to scanning AWS, Azure, and GCP.
Perfect. Okay, so it is going to work with all different clouds, and if you have a team that's using multiple different clouds, that's going to be okay for them?
Yep. It's designed from the ground up to be multi-cloud, right? Because we understand our customers are not just necessarily in one cloud; they're in multi-clouds. So they don't necessarily have all their eggs in the same basket.
Perfect. Okay. Nathan here is wondering, what is the time frame on patches getting developed and implemented?
Well, that's a great question. So I don't know that we are in the business of necessarily doing patches per se. With our Sneak open source product, occasionally there are things that we will develop kind of short-term patches for around open source vulnerabilities. But for the most part, we certainly wait for the industry to come out with, who owns the code to come out with a proper fix. But other than that, we're not necessarily in the business of creating patches so much as making sure that we're informing our audience of what things they can do to fix, either if they're misconfigurations where they can just make a change in code, or if there's a better open source library or a change to their own first party code that they need to make to remediate the issues.
Perfect. Okay. We are getting really close to time here. I've actually stretched way past time, but I'm just having so much fun chatting with you. So I'm going to sneak in one more. Now, this one's a little bit more of a general one, but I'm curious what your answer is, Anthony. So we all know that human error is usually the biggest security problem we're dealing with. That comes up a lot. Any advice from Sneak on how we should deal with that, how we should approach that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think human error is something that always happens, right? So I think for Sneak, it's always about scanning early and scanning often, right? Don't just scan in one place. So we tell our customers, even though you can scan in your developer's IDE, it doesn't mean you shouldn't also scan in the build pipeline, right? You should always have checks along the way because people make mistakes, right? I think the other thing is to really embrace automation, right? And I think the industry is really going that route where they see a lot of benefit from automating things to make sure that, as you're building things, you've got automated checks that are doing all the things that you need them to check for, to make sure that you're doing your best to mitigate human error, right? There's always going to be a human element into things, but there are tools today on the market and there are processes in place today to help with that. I think the biggest challenge that we see with most organizations is really culture, right? And we can't help you with that, unfortunately, right? A lot of that comes from your leadership. It comes from, digital transformation. So certainly there are partners out there and global service integrators, system integrators that bring in all sorts of, kind of organizational change around DevOps and around automation that I certainly think people can leverage. But ultimately, the tooling is there. I think the bigger challenge ultimately comes down to the culture and making sure that everyone is on the same boat and kind of marching in the same direction when it comes to how we should automate and the things that we should do to reduce human error.
I think that's a great point. It often comes down to those basics of change management, right? So awesome answer. Like I said, Anthony, I wish we could keep going. We are way over time. We are going to have to wrap it up there. But before you leave us, if somebody is really amped up and ready to get started with Sneak, what do you recommend? Where do they get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you can certainly get started by the AWS Marketplace and just going up there, but you can also go to sneak.io. And the great thing about Sneak is We have a freemium version, so the majority of our products you can actually scan and start using for free. And then obviously when you want to scale up to enterprise level features like reporting and whatnot, then that's when we get into the paid model. But you can actually get up there today, and if you have a GitHub account, you could literally sign up for Sneak and be scanning your code in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome. And another great way to get started. I got so excited and wrapped up in our conversation that I forgot to put the poll up. So the poll is up now. Please do take a minute and fill that out. This is absolutely in line with, what are next steps? How do we follow up? How do we get the information we want? This right here, the poll on your screen. This is how you get the information that you want. So make sure that you click click and let Sneak know what information that they can send you, how they can follow up with you. Make your life simple. Just click a button and then they will get you the information that you need. So please do make sure you fill out that poll before you head out today, because that is really important. Anthony, you've given us some great information and a lot of things to think about. I do also want to direct people on over to the handouts tab. We've got a white paper there from Sneak, securing cloud applications from code to cloud and back to code again. Anthony, I got to tell you, I really love the handouts from Sneak because they're so informative and engaging, just all around fun to read. So I hope everyone takes a second to download that. And thank you so much, Anthony, for being here with us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining.
All right. Well, I'm giving you all another quick second to answer that poll, and then we're going to move it along. Oh, I feel like there's one last order of business. What is that? Oh, I remember what it is.
All right, that's right. You guessed it. It is time for our very last prize giveaway. Now, in this giveaway, we are going to be giving away a $500 Amazon gift card and 2 of those Apple Watches Series 7. So that's $500 Amazon gift card and 2 Apple Watch Series 7 that are going to go to 3 lucky winners that are here present at the webinar today, because you must be, say it with me now, present at the live webinar in order to qualify to win one of these prizes. So first up, let's give away one of those $500 Amazon gift cards. That's going to go to Leanne Kirkland of Texas. Leanne Kirkland of Texas, you have won a $500 Amazon gift card. Congratulations. And our last 2 winners of the Apple Watch Series 7 are going to be Shane McGuire of Pennsylvania and Jonathan Miller of Massachusetts. Shane McGuire of Pennsylvania and Jonathan Miller of Massachusetts. Congratulations. You have both won an Apple Watch Series 7. So congratulations to all of you. And I've been asked to review all of our winners from today. It's a long list, so bear with me, but I'm going to try to go through it pretty quickly here. Are you ready? Okay. So an Amazon gift card going to Christopher Bogart of Pennsylvania, an Apple Watch going to Scott Bell of Missouri, an Amazon gift card going to Melinda Smith of Kentucky, and an Apple Watch going to Brian Singh of Vermont, and also to Matt Lehman of Illinois. Then we had an Amazon gift card going to Alan Johns of Utah, and an Apple Watch going to David Haithcox of Maryland, as well as Tom Kelly of New Jersey. Then we had an Amazon gift card going to Najad Masood of Texas, and then an Apple Watch going to Jesse Medina of California and John Davis of Indiana. Next up, we had an Amazon gift card going to Courtney Hardy of Ohio. And then we had an Apple Watch going to Christian Kimball of Washington. And last, but certainly not least, we had an Amazon gift card going to Leanne Kirkland of Texas. And then 2 Apple Watches, one going to Shane McGuire in Pennsylvania and one going to Jonathan Miller in Massachusetts. So congratulations to all of you. We will follow up with all of you after we wrap today. And I do want to remind you all, in case you forgot, that there's still a chance to win the Best Question Asked prize. We will review all of the questions asked during our live sessions today. And even if they were not read out loud, you still have an opportunity to win. And we will follow up with you and let you know. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to ask those questions today. It really does make a big difference. It brings up the whole conversation and tone of the discussion. So we very much appreciate that. Now, before you head out, please make sure that you check out the Actual Tech Media ransomware guide in the handouts tab. You can find everything that you need to know about ransomware, how to understand, how to prevent, how to recover. So visit ransomware.org. Ransomware.org. Boy, it's been a long day, I tell you, for more information. And be sure to check that out before you head out. Now, if you are on the webinar today and you're thinking to yourself, man, this seems like a really good time, and it is, it really is, please do come join us. We would love to have a conversation with you on a future summit, EcoCast or MegaCast, any kind of webinar. If you think you'd like to be a presenter on one of our webinar series, please do reach out to us, connect@actualtechmedia.com, and let us know what you have in mind. Let's brainstorm. Let's have a conversation. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank once again our incredible speakers and the teams from Veeam, Rubrik, Haiku, Palo Alto, Gigamon, and Sneak for making this MegaCast possible. And a very special thank you to all of you for attending, for asking some great questions. I had so much fun with you all today talking about all the many ways that you are building, enhancing, scaling, and securing your AWS environments. I hope that you've all learned some interesting and helpful tips. I know I've gotten a ton out of it. Now, before you take off today, I do want to make sure I remind you to mark your calendars. Come back and join us on Wednesday, October 12th for our MegaCast on fixing your broken data protection, DRES, and disaster recovery. These are important topics. So make sure that you mark that in your calendar. That's Wednesday, October 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking DRES. We're going to be talking disaster recovery. It's going to be an interesting conversation. So get that on your calendar. Now, there's lots more webinars between now and then. There's lots going on in October. So be sure to explore that calendar and sign up for some webinars. And I really hope that we get to have a conversation again soon. Until then, have an absolutely beautiful rest of your day.